I think that's turned 1:30, so good afternoon, members. Welcome to this special meeting of the Council to consider our proposed local development plan. Before we start, I would like, on behalf of the Council, to express our sincere condolences to Councillor Maitland and her family for the tragic loss of their youngest son, Freddie. Some of us attended Freddie's public funeral on Friday, and it is clear that he was not only much loved by his own family, but by his friends and the community. And he is, I think, it's a terrible loss of a very promising young man. And I think our hearts go out, all of us, to Freddie's family for the suffering they're enduring at the moment. I also want to pay tribute to members of council staff who have had to cope with the winter weather. I believe the bunker was open all night. It's been hard work for a lot of council staff, and I think I would like recorded our thanks for the efforts. I think often the efforts of council staff are not fully recognised and go to a certain extent unnoticed. It's important that we actually recognise how hard many of our staff have to work at times like this. On the matter of declaration of interest, which is about to come up, could I please ask members who wish to make a declaration for the benefit of the minutes, they could get clear the area that they are declaring an interest in and also the nature of the interest that they have in that area. This is an important issue because it's a sort of thing that people can be referred to the Standards Commissioner for. So I think we want to be as transparent as you can for your own protection, if nothing else. And then we'll go through how we're going to deal with it. But basically, when it comes to the part of the plan where you have declared an interest, we'll be asking members to leave at that point and to return after the vote has been taken or a decision has been made in regard of that part of the plan. Okay, Rona, have you any apologies?
Yes, Leader. We have apologies from Councillors Bell, Charteris, Gilroy, McGregor and Maitland. Councillor Scobie is not present as we start the meeting, and we have a message that Councillor Wilson is running 15 minutes late, so he should be here soon.
Thanks, Rona. Now, can I ask members to declare their interests and, again, to explain where and how? Henry.
Thanks, Chair. In my professional capacity as an agent, I would like to declare an interest in the sites at Arnon, reference H4, BMI 1, and the Eastriggs, ERL, H3 and MU1.
Thanks. John Young?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to declare an interest in the Dumfries Parkhead area. I have a family member who's leading a campaign. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor James?
I would like to declare an ownership interest in DBT H6. Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor. Any further declarations at all? Yes. Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Chair. The site in Creetown, CRE H1, land at Barhome Mains. I live next door to that site, and I do not plan to leave the room unless there is a specific debate on that site. And the other thing is Wallet Smarts, land in Castle Douglas. I'm a shareholder in Wallet Smarts. So I'll be declaring an interest in leaving at that point.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. I made a representation on a site in Newton Stewart, NST H202, and I will take no part in discussion on that site.
Do you have a personal interest in it, though? Or
I have no personal interest, no, other than having made a representation.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily preclude you from taking part in the debate if you wish to do so.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Ronnie.
Thank you. I'd like to declare an interest in DFS H4 Heath Hall College, as we're a landowner on an adjacent site, and I will leave the room if there is debate on that site. Thank you.
Councillor Ronnie?
Exactly the same as Councillor Johnson, neighbouring business property to DFS H4.
Okay, not missed anyone? Good. Right, thanks. Okay, this report on the proposed local development plan 2 seeks approval for our forthcoming local development plan, which is laid out in Appendix 1. The supplementary documents were available in the group rooms for people to peruse, and it will be published for an 8-week period, if approved, for the public to make representations. That period to fall from the 29th of January until the 26th of March this year. Members will recall that the Council agreed to defer consideration of the report when we met on the 12th of December to give more opportunity for members to consider their comments on what is a very significant and comprehensive document. And I have to say, having seen the comments that have come in, I think that was a wise decision of the Council, because it does give us time to give proper consideration to a number of issues. And hopefully that this additional time has given members the opportunity to be better placed to provide input before the plan goes out to public consultation. We should recall, of course, that the public can make representations during that 8-week period. Members of the public or developers can make representations there, and those representations will accompany the proposed local development plan to the Scottish Government, and the reporter will consider other representations. So this is not the end of the story as far as communities or developers are concerned. They can continue to make representations during that period, and they will be considered by the Scottish Government. I want now to outline how we will deal with discussion and consideration of the plan. A number of members have already submitted representations in advance to the planners to help preparation for this meeting, and thanks to everybody who's done that. And I'm going to ask Steve Rogers to take us through the representations that we've received. We're going to start with the policy and guidance, and then we'll move on to the settlement areas, dealing with each settlement where a representation has been received, and having a full discussion and coming to a decision on each settlement, whether that is by consensus or by a vote, before moving on to the next. So that's a period when people will have to absent themselves if they have an interest. So this should allow, as I say, this should allow people to who have declared an interest in a small part of the plan to take part in the rest of the discussion of the plan on which they don't have an interest. Also, there will be an opportunity for members to make comments or raise issues about other settlements or issues that have not been raised in Steve's presentation. So although we did ask people to put the representations in by the 10th of January so they could be compiled and the officers, planning officers could consider them, we're not debarring anybody from bringing up anything that's come up since. So there will be an opportunity at the end for that, for any other issues to be discussed. When members leave the room because of an interest that they have declared, officers will do their best to find members and let them know that the discussion around that area has concluded, so people will not be excluded for any longer than they need to be. I'm going to ask Steve to lead us through the discussion, and I'll also ask officers to hand out to distribute the handout that Steve's prepared regarding the ones which have been presented to planning officers. I would like your advice as to whether or not you want a recess to consider that document, and if so, how long you feel that you would need. I wonder, actually, maybe we should dish out the document first, and then people can see how long it is. And
yes, Chair, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think it would be a good idea to distribute that hard copy document straight away. It's really a supplement to some of the issues and points that I'm going to present to members as we go through the afternoon, as you say, to help you to structure the meeting. I wonder if maybe before we move on to that, could I just draw your attention to an omission that we've discovered in the covering report. Which is that the list of supplementary guidance that will be published as a draft alongside LDP2, there is one piece of supplementary guidance that's missing from that list and needs to be added in. and that is draft supplementary guidance on sustainability, reducing carbon emissions in buildings, and that's a new piece of supplementary guidance. The draft is available on the website. It's not that we've forgotten to put it up on the website or that we've forgotten to publish it. It's just an omission from this covering report. So that would need to be corrected. I can probably make a start whilst that document is being circulated, because what I propose to do, Chair, is just to spend a few minutes doing a very brief introduction and overview before getting into the detail of the various issues that members have submitted to us.
After you've done the sort of overview, I'll ask members whether they want a break to have a read through the...
Okay. Okay, thank you. This first bit won't take too long, won't take up too much of your time, but I thought we should just probably give a very brief recap, first of all in terms of where we are in the LDP process, together with a very succinct overview of the proposed plan that you're being asked to consider this afternoon, before going on to go through in detail the various issues raised by members following the previous deferral. So in terms of the actual process, a number of you have probably seen this slide too many times already, but just a reminder that we are now at the proposed plan stage of our new LDP, that we have already been through a significant period of engagement and consultation, which led to the main issues report that was published this time last year. And all of that has been fed into the preparation of what's in front of you this afternoon, which is the proposed plan. Once we get beyond this stage, as the leader has already referred to, it will go out for a further period when members of the public and landowners and developers can make further representation on the proposed plan. These will all then be considered by a Scottish Government reporter at what's called an examination. It used to be called public inquiries, but they're now called examinations. So it's an examination process. We have to go through that before we can then proceed to adopt the plan, either with or without changes as recommended by the examination process and the Scottish Government reporter. So that's just a quick overview and a reminder of where we are in the process. In terms of timescales, this is the timetable that was ratified at EEI committee in November. It's just a reminder of the steps that we've been through in terms of the main issues report and where we are now in terms of the proposed plan. You'll see there the proposed LDP would be published for public consultation over an 8-week period that would take us towards the end of March. Those representations would then be assessed, and we'll bring a report back to full council at that point before submitting the proposed plan for its examination, which we anticipate with a fair wind should kick off towards the end of this year and run into early next year. We'll then have to consider the outcome of that examination and bring a further report back to you, seeking authority for us to then go ahead and adopt LDP2. It's just maybe worth saying that as we proceed through all of that process, we have to be mindful of the fact that current local development plan remains in force until such time as we adopt LDP2, and the current local development plan will continue to be used as a basis for making decisions on planning applications, for example. So just a very quick overview of the proposed plan itself. The vision contained within the proposed plan sets out what the region would look like in 20 years' time. in support of some of our wider council priorities in terms of supporting the local economy, for example. It sets out a range of planning policies that are there to help guide and influence future development across the region. It contains a number of site allocations which are there to address anticipated future need. There are some 169 sites identified in LDP2 for development, which includes 42 brand new sites. The rest have would be carried forward from the current LDP, and those sites cover housing and employment and industrial uses. And all of that is supported by a range of supplementary guidance, which we intend to publish alongside Local Development Plan 2, to allow people to see the detail of how some of those policies would be interpreted and applied. So that's the overview, Chair. And as I say, the next part of the presentation really is to start to go through in some detail those issues raised by members and submitted by members following on from the meeting here on the 12th of December. And we've grouped those, as you can see. So we've grouped those, first of all, into issues and comments received in relation to the policies and supporting text of the plan. And these principally relate to housing in the countryside policy and some comments about Dumfries Town Centre and the mid-steeple quarter. The majority of the comments that we've received relate to a range of different housing sites in different settlements, and you can see them listed there. I think we've got about 13 sites in total that we've received comments on, and I would propose, as we go through the afternoon, that we'll just take you through those comments in detail, one settlement at a time. So the first thing to deal with, if you're happy with me to proceed, would be the policies and
yeah, I'm just going to,
text
at this point, I have two questions. One is that it's been intimated to me that there may be a suggestion for another policy change, which is not on the sheet. And now, do we take that at the end of the policies and supporting text, or at the end of the entire discussion?
We could take it just now as part of the...
I think we'll probably we'll take it during the policies and supporting text. Can I just ask if people are wanting a recess to read through the sites? Yeah, okay. What sort of 15 minutes, 20 minutes? 15 minutes, okay. Could we have a recess for 15 minutes, give people time to consider the... Yep. Okay, we can restart the meeting. I've been told that, Councillor Ronnie, that there was something else that you want to declare that's come to your attention.
Sorry for not bringing it up earlier. It's point, let me just find it. It is DFS H255 at Mavis Grove, and it's just a declaration of interest should it come up. It's my parents' property neighbours that site for discussion, so I'll abstain from any discussion or a vote.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to continue with your presentation?
Okay, so I indicated that we would first of all deal with the policy and supporting text issues that had been raised with us by members. So the first one of those were some comments that we received in relation to policy H3, which is the housing in the countryside policy, which can be found on page 45, I think, of your papers this afternoon. So the issue that's been raised with us is some concern about the wording of one of the criteria, one of the bullet point criteria in that policy. It's the criteria that says it is a single house associated with succession planning of a viable farm holding, brackets, where there are no buildings suitable or economically viable for conversion to residential use on the farm unit. So the suggestion has been that the second part of that sentence, essentially from where there are no onwards, should be deleted. So the new bullet point would simply read, "It is a single house associated with succession planning of a viable farm holding." So in terms of our own assessment of that proposal, clearly this is part of a suite of policies which are aimed at providing guidance for future development within the rural area, and they have been framed to try to be as supportive and possible as we can be, whilst also striking the balance with recognising the need to protect our natural environment and the natural landscape setting of Dumfries and Galloway, which is very valuable. The deletion of the second part of that sentence, our advice is that one of the aims of that bullet point is really to encourage, in the first instance, opportunities to reuse or convert buildings that already exist on the farm holding before going on to consider sites for a new single house, should there be an overall justification for a house in the first place. So from our perspective, we wouldn't advise making a change to that policy, which is one that certainly serves a very strong purpose in terms of its application by the Planning Applications Committee. I'm happy to take questions and
invite any contributions on that. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Leader, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this particular policy. I think this probably comes, certainly my understanding, that this comes from, I think it was introduced at the last local development plan. Certainly on the face of it, looks like a very, very good policy when it comes to succession planning or even partial retirement of farmers in particular. But my understanding for the information that I've received is that there's been one taken up over the last 3 or 4 years of that being implemented. So it would tell me that it's not working under its current format. Certainly, in reputation, I think most people in the Planning Application Committee have had reputations from the agricultural industry in regards to how it's working, whether it works or not, and is it suitable. I think this, certainly from my perspective, this would certainly make it far more accessible to the succession planning of an agricultural farmer or smallholding, depending on what it is. Naturally, a business like that, so you've got the farmer who's getting to 60, 70, or sometimes even into their 80s, depending. You know what farmers like, they want to work to the very last. And they get that stage where their sons or their daughters, whatever it may be, are wanting to come up and they're wanting to keep the farm within the family, they're wanting to carry on, but they want somewhere for the older part of that business to actually move on to, but still be part of, whether it's looking sheep, looking beasts, or just being natural security in that area. So as it stands, we're kind of forcing farmers in particular to look at old buildings, existing dry stone buildings, which were not really fit for purpose, take a lot of money to renovate, change. Ultimately, these buildings are oftentimes looking onto the existing farmhouses, so it encroaches on amenity and such like of the existing kind of two properties looking at each other, and it's a rural setting. I don't think we need to have that in a rural setting. And then that farm building, obviously, that existing building has been getting used for a purpose. It's had its use within the farm, whether it's a food store or for keeping lambs, whatever it may be. So you use that building, refurbish it, and you change its use. It becomes a residential unit, and then you've got to go around and strip a part of a greenfield site somewhere else to create a new building to accommodate what that use was previously for, usually in the shape of a portal building. So to me, it makes no real sense. There's no real loss at all in regards to putting this forward. This is that. So I don't think I would disagree. There may well be a perceived risk in regards to sporadic development. I don't see it happening. We've had one in the last 5 years, nearly 4 years, I think it is, since we adopted the last plan. We've had one come forward. I don't think this is something we're going to get inundated with at all. So I would certainly support that proposal. I think it would help the farming and agricultural industry in Dumfries and Galloway and help boost the economy.
Okay. Any further points? Councillor Hislop and Councillor Thompson.
Maybe just to help me decide which way I would vote on this, but can you tell me what do you mean by suitable and economically viable. The reason being, I think Councillor Crothers summed it up, you may have a suitable building, a random rubble old barn or something that could be converted, but it may be an integral part of the workings of that because it might be a granary shed or something. And economically viable, does that mean to say if it costs more to actually redevelop a building than put a new one up, therefore it's not economically viable? Is that the simple equation that you look at, or what is it by economically viable?
Do you want to answer that before we go on to the next comment?
Chair, yes, if it would help. The detail of how the policy would be applied, including guidance on what's meant by these terms, is contained within the supplementary guidance. And certainly the wording there is quite deliberate in terms of indicating that this would only be the case where there are no buildings that are considered suitable or economically viable. And by suitable, it also refers to things like the general amenity of the setting of that building. So going back to the earlier comments about farmers potentially being forced to look at unsuitable buildings, well, that wouldn't be the case under the policy because it's only where the buildings are considered or deemed to be suitable. The detail of how that would be applied is contained within the draft supplementary guidance. And the same with viability. It refers to the viability of conversion. So where the cost of conversion exceeds the value of the end product, then that would be deemed to be non-viable as a conversion opportunity.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, it's just in a similar vein, but it's to do with the viability aspect. I mean, my view with that, I wasn't in a hurry to take out the part in brackets, but I think a wee bit of clarification, just that where the conversion would not effectively impact on the viability of the farm holding in itself. So there's the viability of the cost of a conversion, which is one thing, but if that would that building being considered effectively be deemed surplus to the viability of the farm holding in the first place, in which case it could then, because by converting it you might actually reduce the viability of the farm holding in total. So there's the viability of the building in itself to be converted, but there's also what role it currently plays within the viability of the farm holding. And I think that's maybe where there might have been a wee bit of ambiguity on my part anyway. But that may be included in the supplementary guidance, which, to be fair, I haven't studied as judiciously as maybe I should have.
Yeah, well, certainly the detail of the supplementary guidance will be reconsidered when we bring each piece of supplementary guidance back to EEI committee once LDP 2 is adopted, and we can re-examine the detail of the wording within the supplementary guidance. But the issue that you're raising, I would consider is covered by the issue of suitability. So if it's a conversion that would cause an operational problem to the operation of the farm unit, then the conversion is not a suitable opportunity. So it should be covered by that.
Just on that same one, yeah, I think it's a matter of interpretation of the wordings that's in there. I took it exactly what you're saying, Stephen, because I've been in that situation before, and I've went through that. And it is, if the building's suitable for the business, but not no building suitable, means that if you've got a building there and you need it for the business, it's not suitable.
Councillor Crothers.
I understand where people are coming from, but I suppose where I'm coming from is I think the proof of the pudding's in the eating. I've looked at supplementary guidance and I've looked at the case history behind over the last 3 or 4 years. One successful application is my understanding. I think that kind of outlines the success rate in this, and it says would result in sporadic development in the countryside. I disagree with that because the amount of uptake there's been. I don't think this has got to lead to any kind of wild development at all. It's about succession planning, and it would be obviously conditioned accordingly. So it would be tied to the farm through a condition, I would imagine that would be the case. So, or the small holding. I mean, I think it's certainly worth having a try it. I don't think there's any. I know last time we kind of missed a trick when it came to come with the supplementary planning guidance as it came forward, but I just think this is fairly straightforward and should be supported. Leader.
Councillor Nicholson?
Can we just look at the wording and clarify the wording and change the wording to make it, more transparent, if you want, about what's actually meant in there? Can keep the actual meaning of it, but make it more transparent about what it actually means.
We do have, we are able to delegate to officers to find more suitable wording. I think the other issue that Councillor Carruthers raised is where there may be a building, but it's, which could be converted, but it's right up against the farmhouse and people are, overlooking each other. Now, would that mean that that building was considered not to be suitable because the two buildings are overlooking each other? Would that?
Well, Chair, yes. I mean, those are the sorts of issues that would be covered by the term suitability. The reason that we've kept the policy wording quite succinct is that we do have supplementary guidance there to expand on the meanings and the definition. And if we start to try to expand the policy wording to cover all of that, we could end up with quite a lengthy policy that's quite complicated to interpret in that way.
Got any further contributions on that? Councillor Dempsey and Councillor Crabb.
Thanks, Chair. I certainly wouldn't want a free-for-all. I don't think that's what this is designed to do. And maybe the suggestion that Steve produces another form of words that members find more acceptable might be the way forward. We've had a couple of applications recently, Planning Committee, where a business plan has been submitted and the organisation submitted it didn't want their name put to it because it was so flawed or inaccurate. Maybe David Sutty can maybe explain better what I'm trying to say, but there are times when business plans are submitted that don't actually stack up on the back of a plan application being submitted. And I think we've seen countless applications for houses that are simply houses in the countryside, however else you might try and disguise them, that's what they are. And if we're having building in the countryside, then that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't need an organisation to change its policy. We just simply say we encourage building in the countryside and we're done with it. And the last thing I'll say is if you ever take a run around Orkney, their plan system must be different for yours because it's littered with ruined houses and brand new houses sitting beside them. And it just doesn't look right, and that's where we might find ourselves if we don't tighten up this particular policy or keep it at least structured.
Sorry, Councillor.
No, thanks. I do appreciate the remarks, but I mean, I think this is each three is, I understand, six different bullet points. This is one of them, and it's only in regards to succession planning, nothing else. And it's about the existing farms that are there, they're viable, they're up, they're running. This is for the industry that's already up and running and working and wanting to remain within the farmer wanting to keep that business and keep it within a local area makes it affordable for them, so they can live and let that succession happen usually through a family member taking it on, and the older generation reach retiring gracefully and steadily. So I mean, again, I would move that we accept the wording that's there, Leader.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just want a point of clarification. Councillor Carruthers said there's only been one that's actually been built in. Is that correct?
I'm afraid I don't have that information to hand. What I would say is that because of the wording, the other thing to point out here with this bullet point, which, as has been correctly mentioned, is only one of 6 bullet points within the housing in the countryside policy. The wording of this is slightly different from what's in the current local development plan, because the current local development plan specifically refers to retirement planning of farm holdings, and the feedback that we got from the agricultural community is that that's not really the issue. The issue is about succession planning. So we've changed the wording, so it could be that that opens up the possibility of more applications coming forward in the future than we've had currently. The other thing is that we would only get an application for a single house come forward where somebody hasn't been able to find a conversion opportunity. So the low level of applications could be an indication that the preference that we're expressing towards identifying conversion and reuse opportunities is actually working.
Councillor Nicholson.
I mean, there's certainly one in my ward, and I don't know if that's the one he's talking about, that was actually had a house built beside the Farmstead for succession planning. I don't know if there's any others across the region which were done by officers and agreed at that particular level. I do have a concern, however, if we open the book for this and see things moving forward. So I would propose that we go with the no change proposal that's been recommended by officers.
Councillor Nicholson.
The point about retirement's been covered because previously I know that was when they were looking at this policy many years ago when I was in the planning, and there was people trying to go through that route, and as soon as they had the house built, then people were moving out and they were then getting sold. So I think it kind of took care of that aspect to it, where there is proper succession. I see it's planning within that. So I think that's been taken care of. Thanks.
I just wondered, can you see if you can clarify, in terms of the supplementary guidance, which might clarify some of the issues around that, we would see that again, would we? Or EEI would see that before the final plan?
Chair, the supplementary guidance will come back to the EEI committee once we get to a position where the LDP2 itself is adopted. So all of the supplementary guidance will have to come back and be agreed by EEI. So there's plenty of opportunity there to have another look at the detailed wording of that. The supplementary guidance doesn't have to go through the same process as the actual proposed plan, so it doesn't have to go through the examination process. It doesn't require to be signed off by full council. So we've got a lot more flexibility in terms of revisiting the draft supplementary guidance.
So it would be possible to word supplementary guidance to take into account some of the concerns that Councillor Crothers has expressed in terms of houses overlooking each other, or
yes, I mean certainly that's subject to consideration by members of the EEI committee. Yes.
Sorry, Leader. Yes, if Ian has made put down a motion, I'm happy to second it.
And Councillor Hislop.
Chair, Councillor Nichols beat me to the point. However, I think if there is concern with regard to that point, you could actually put it into your supplementary guidance, because you can make sure that there's no houses sold. Is it within 10 years? I think that's already in the supplementary guidance as one of the criteria. So you wouldn't have the situation where people are actually just building their house, moving on and saying we're needing another one. So that's already covered. So I think the points Councillor Crothers has raised is quite valid.
So I don't know which is who was it, whether it's Councillor Dempster.
Chair, if it goes to that stage, I would suggest we make everyone a section 75, and that would tie the house to the land indefinitely. However, having said that, Councillor Driver's made a motion or a proposal, and I'm happy to second that. It'll probably be an amendment now, but
okay, so
which is we have no change to the current H3.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Crothers, seconded by Councillor Nicholl, and an amendment by Councillor Driver, seconded by Councillor Dempster. Okay, yeah, Councillor Crothers.
Just to say, I mean, on Councillor Dempster's point there, I think he's absolutely right. Whether it's a condition, whether it's a legal obligation, no issues whatsoever with tying the house or the residential unit to the farm holding of the land, if that's possible. I would imagine it would be a minimum of a condition, but I know Scottish Government will look at it in different policy terms. I think they're looking to remove legal obligations, but either way, I'd be quite content with either, because I think we keep it there for the right reasons. It is for the viability of the farm holding and the agricultural industry in Dumfries and Galloway.
Councillor McKee.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but on that matter alone, the number of requests we've had to lift that condition over the years have been quite amazing. And I think it's, although I wouldn't have any problem putting it in, I don't think it's as binding as we would like.
Any further? Nothing further. So we have a motion from Councillor Crothers and an amendment from Councillor Driver.
Okay. Leader?
Amendment.
Deputy Leader?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie. Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Ian Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Hagman.
Amendment.
Councillor Howie.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Johnston.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor Little.
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Ronnie.
Motion.
Councillor Sloan.
Amendment.
Councillor Stitt. Councillor Surtees.
Amendment.
Councillor Tate.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wood.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Amendment.
Okay. Can I just check that everybody's voted? Yep. Okay. The amendment is carried 20 votes to 16.
If we could move on to the next issue.
This one might be a little bit more straightforward. The issue that has been raised with us in relation to Dumfries Town Centre is that the supporting text within that part of the plan should give greater recognition to the role of housing in future in Dumfries Town Centre, and this is referring to page 99 and also page 100 within your papers. So the suggested response to that is really to add housing into the range of uses referred to on page 99. I'll move on as well to the second point that was raised in these submissions, which is about the role of the mid-steeple quarter project and its objectives to regenerate the heart of the town centre and the heart of the high street. And there was wording, and there is wording within the proposed plan that was intended to reflect that. However, we would certainly be quite comfortable with that being supplemented and boosted to give greater recognition to those regeneration objectives within the town centre.
Thanks. Can I invite comments or questions? Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Chair. And just looking at the proposed amendments, I think these are a good way forward, making sure that the mid-steeple area is actually looked after in a way that we'd want to, fits in well with the policies and procedures. So I would propose that we actually go with that in both of them, both page 99 and 100.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. If Archie's happy to move that, I'm happy to second that. I think he's absolutely spot on.
Okay. Got any dissenting voices? Well, not necessarily. Councillor Hislop.
It's not dissenting, but how will these sort of aims tie in with like conservation area policies? Because sometimes we can't deliver what we want to do because it's in a conservation area, so it might be difficult to deliver housing for certain issues. Will there be a sort of relaxation maybe of the conservation policies to allow development in the town centre to come forward housing, entertainment, or whatever it is.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. It's really, this is talking about the kind of range of uses. A lot of that will involve reuse of existing properties, in particular vacant properties and vacant upper stories and so on. So it wouldn't really have any implications for the kind of wider conservation policies that would continue to apply.
Is that? Oh, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Dempster.
I think it mentions, are you taking the two of them together? Is that what's happening? Yeah. Well, I can understand what Councillor Hislop's saying there then, because it actually mentions new housing. So new housing in a conservation area might be difficult.
Councillor Dempster. Okay, Councillor Dempster.
Okay, thanks, Leon. No, just an observation. It talks about ensuring the future vibrancy and transforming the built fabric in public realm. That'll only be if we can include enforcement and maybe a compulsory purchase, because there are some people who are not willing to engage with the planning department or indeed authorities, and it's no use maybe just having a wonderful overview if we can't deal entirely with the issues that are brought to us in relation to the town centre improvement, especially in places like Dumfries.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. Taking on board the points Councillor Hislop and Councillor Nicholson made, I was looking actually at the conservation areas policy HE2, although I know there are lots of policies in the mix here, but it does specifically say that in considering developments, Council will need to be satisfied that new development, as well as alterations or other redevelopment of buildings, will preserve or enhance the character, etc., etc. I would take that to mean that there is no presumption against new development, simply that the bar for new development being agreed is somewhat higher, as it should be in a conservation area. I guess it's always a case of striking the balance between the two. But I don't think that the supporting statements with regard to housing necessarily cut across the overarching policy issue with conservation areas, because one is policy, the other is supporting statement, if you follow me. I don't think there's necessarily a conflict there, at least to any greater extent than there is always a degree of conflict in planning which the system sets out to try and resolve.
Also, the reference to new housing is already in the LDP. That's actually part of the current wording. It's actually the bit which is in bold, although it doesn't look terribly bold underneath that, which is the proposed addition to it. Are members content with those two? Yeah, thanks. The final one on the policies and supporting text was a proposal from Councillor Carruthers in respect of policy ED2, which I think is on page 37. Yeah, it's on page 36 of the papers. Councillor Carruthers, too.
Thanks, Leader. It's much to have a discussion about it, and I haven't got any actually specific wording for it, but it's about the rural development through business. It's back to the agricultural, forestry, so on and so forth again. And I'll just read so we're absolutely clear. I suppose what I'll do is I'll read out what's in front of us, and I'll ask Steve a question in regards to the last part of it, which I've asked him already, so he's aware, so he should have an answer for it. What it states is proposals which expand existing businesses or create new ones in the rural area will be considered favourably subject to other policies within the plan. There is a preference that will generally be within or adjacent to existing settlements. That's a specific topic I like to discuss, that particular piece there. But then it also goes on to say sites out with settlements may be acceptable where they offer opportunities to diversify an existing business, or this specific bit would like Steve just to tell us what this means, or related to a site-specific resource or opportunity. So if we just get the answer to that first, then I'll put it into context, just what my thoughts in regards to ED2, and maybe something could be worked out either on the cuff, or we can leave it to the planning officials to put the wording together.
Steve?
Chair, yes, thank you. I mean, the aim of the policy is to provide some support for development of economic activity and businesses within our rural area. And the purpose of that part of the policy, that final sentence, is to recognise that there are some opportunities, some business opportunities that are really quite specific to a particular site, and it's because they rely on something that site has that other sites don't, whether that's a natural resource in the shape of a loch or forestry or something of that nature, or some other form of natural resource, or indeed it could refer to some existing infrastructure that is already there, that's enabling a further business opportunity to be exploited and to be developed. And it's something that therefore couldn't simply be, as an opportunity that couldn't simply be lifted and applied to a site in some other location. So it's there to encourage and to recognise that these circumstances do occur, and where they do occur, then the policy position is that would be supported.
Okay, thanks for that, Leader. So, I suppose it puts it into context. To me, I just felt they are very few and far between, but ultimately, that's probably why it's there. So, just clarity in regards to that. When I was looking at this, what popped into my mind was macro businesses, small businesses. It's not larger organisations or companies. So, you're looking at maybe agricultural engineers or even agricultural contractors, local forestry workers, small business, like 1 and 2, maybe 3 man businesses, not even necessarily limited companies. So, and if they want an opportunity to actually expand, what we are saying through this here, from what I can see, is that, listen, your customer base is right in the middle of the rural area, whether it's forestry, whether it's agricultural, whether it's whatever it may be in that location, and we're asking you to go to the nearest settlement, find an industrial or business park there, build your unit there, and work from there, and go back to your, so you haven't to travel all this, just go back to your customer base. Now, there's a couple of things apply there straight away with small businesses. Sometimes small businesses have pockets of land that they own, or at least land certainly cheaper out in the rural area, so it makes it more affordable for businesses to grow and expand in that type of business. It is a natural place to work, close to your customer base as well. Whereas we bring that closer, potentially creates conflict within settlements, so on and so forth. I have it certainly in my local area, in 2 or 3 different occasions we've had it actually. So that's where I'm kind of coming from. I just think, haven't got the wording of that, because it's something that's grew as we've discussed this as a group and it's come forward. We just think that this restricts the small businesses in Dumfries and Galloway. Predominantly, that's what our economy in Dumfries and Galloway is based on. It's growing these small businesses. If we could grow every 2-man band in Dumfries and Galloway up to 4-man band, we've got ourselves at a different level of economy within Dumfries and Galloway within a year if we could do that. So if we could either think of something today, I've not got to make up something off the cuff. I just want to bring it to the council's attention, or we ask the officials to go back, work on that, and we actually get a chance even just to kind of somehow ratify that, or even simply this is what the officials are putting forward. Ultimately, through representations of the members of the public, we could revisit that when it comes back. But just a point I think the council should be aware of, something like I say we've developed, just by the time we looked at this and took full consideration of it, we kind of run out of time, as maybe a lot of us did.
So there's no specific proposal at the present time, it's just some considerations how that might be handled. And when you say man, I assume you mean person.
I don't mean persons, I'm not being sexist in any way, but it's no different saying horsepower, manpower, it's people, businesses. Okay, thank you.
Right, Steve, have any comment on that?
Nothing further to add.
Yeah. Would members be content? Oh, sorry. Councillor McCombs, Councillor Tom.
Thanks, Leader. I do believe that Councillor Carruthers has highlighted a weakness there. The absence of the word expand does create problems. That were it to read, where they offer opportunities to diversify or expand an existing business. I think that would be much more appropriate.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Carruthers.
Okay. Thanks, Leader. It's again, it's down to language, but the first part where it's talking about expanding existing businesses or creating new ones, okay, that's favourably the sentence about the preference, I think that sometimes maybe could be seen as giving a direction where really it's just expressing a preference. I'm not sure how necessary that sentence is, because the next sentence after that goes on to explain what may be acceptable if the case is made. So I think if the last sentence maybe includes something where opportunities to diversify an existing or maybe creating a new one that is site specific to that resource or opportunity, that would allow that sort of flexibility. But again, this is me just off the cuff coming up with words off the top of my head, but I think there is something in there about it could be taken to mean that it's only an existing business that could diversify rather than a new one that could develop in a site specific area. So I think there is maybe room for manoeuvre there, but that's just my view at the moment.
Councillor Crothers?
No, I mean, both Jim and Stephen have picked up on it's the New Start thing as well. It's there, but I think for New Start business, somebody wants to start a New Start business in the agriculture or forestry or even fishery, and it's to make it affordable and achievable, working right within the middle of the customer base. There's a deficit there here for sure, and it's like I say, it's difficult to make it off the cuff. Picked up and it's kind of late in the day. Haven't really had a chance to discuss it either with the planners either to any great degree. So, I mean, it's something we kind of just I think you've got to touch on it. Is there a process that we could actually allow the planners to deal with this in an appropriate manner? But they've obviously got a clear steer from ourselves.
Councillor Dempster?
Normally, if an application of this comes in, it's considered on its merit, leader. That's why the policy's there. And what I wouldn't want us to see would be us suddenly creating dozens of brownfield sites that are then open to development later on because of a policy to develop brownfield sites. I think we would need to be very careful how we word this, although clearly to support business development, it's critical in this the region. I just think we have to be careful. I think that's why the policy is written the way it is.
I just wondered whether would members be prepared to delegate to officers to consider how this wording might be able to be amended to reflect the concerns that have been expressed, but also the concerns on both sides, including the concerns expressed by Councillor Dempster from the other point of view.
Leader, we could certainly add a couple of words to that final sentence to clarify, I think, that issue that has been raised. Yes.
Members be content with that? Okay, right, thanks. Thank you. We now move on to the consideration of specific sites. I invite Steve to take us through the first site. Is page 102, site DFS H3 Noble Hill, Dumfries and DFS H7.
Right. I'll deal first of all with the Dumfries sites, and we'll go through those one at a time. But I'll pause after each individual site to allow opportunity for questions and debate.
So members only who have an interest can vacate when those sites are being discussed, but they're not prevented from discussing the rest of the area, if you like. It's just the particular sites in which they have an interest.
Okay, so the first of those it essentially covers two sites. DFS H3, the site at Noble Hill, and the previous site, DFS H7, Brownrigg Loaning, which is in the current local development plan. So you can see there we've summarised the issues that members have brought to us, submitted to us, which is that they have received a number of approaches from local residents and the local community expressing some concerns, objecting to some specific elements of the development of these sites, in particular the allocation of DFS H3 Noble Hill for housing, the loss of accessible public open space. There's also some concern about the removal of the longer term site that's in the current plan, which is DFS H7 Brownrigg Loaning in the current plan, and opposition to development on some of the playing fields area due to loss of accessible, safe, green, open space. So these are all issues that have been brought to us by members, and those members have also made some suggestions which would need to be considered this afternoon. And these suggestions include the potential for removing DFS H3 entirely, or reinstating the larger site boundary on that allocation that exists within the current local development plan, allocating some of the open space around the site as CF2 and CFT policy areas, so that's essentially protection of open space, and also the suggestion has come forward about reinstating the larger long-term site DFSH7 that exists in the current local development plan. Just to remind members, the plan is included in the handout that you've all had. So this is showing you the extended DFSH3 as it currently exists in the local development plan, together with the larger long-term expansion site of DFSH7 Brown Rigaloning, which is, as I say, included in the current plan, but which we were proposing to take out in the new proposed plan for LDP2. So, having considered all of the submissions that members made and the points that members have raised, we've put forward in that document, as you can see, a proposed or a suggested way forward that members might like to consider, which is that in order to achieve a number of aims, really, in order to provide more flexibility in terms of the overall master planning of this area, in order to try to ensure that there are more opportunities realised to create long-term sustainable public open space areas and long-term sustainable infrastructure. We are suggesting that you might like to consider going back to having the expanded DFS H3, but also reintroducing the long-term expansion area, DFS H7. The main reason that H7 was taken out in terms of LDP2 was there's some strong concerns about the extent of surface water flooding and surface flooding, which is not related to floodplain, but is related to pluvial activity, which also in turn suggests that there are if a proper master planned approach is taken in the long term to this area, then there are opportunities for that issue to be addressed through engineering processes, for example. But a master planned approach would certainly encourage that type of approach to future development here. Happy to answer any questions that members might have on these opportunities.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Campbell? John Campbell.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I did put a representation on this, and although my representation was 2.5 pages long, I know this is a shortened version here, so some of the elected members are obviously just seeing what's in front of them at the moment. But yeah, to take out DFSH3, and the main reasons was around the open spaces. Now, looking at our own policies from CF2 onwards, you've got green network spaces, which is part of, this is on page 70 of 368, paragraph 4.9. The Scottish planning policy states that development plans should identify and promote green networks where this will add value to the provision, protection, enhancement and connectivity of open spaces and habitats. And at 4.91, slightly further down, not only does this have a social and health benefits through encouraging physical activities and time spent. Now, most of the constituents in my ward have been using this facility for a number of years. Yes, it has been in the previous LDP for nigh on 30 years for developing on, but and I can understand, you know, that we can change these the development plans. You can take pieces out, like H7 was already recommended to be taken out. So H3 should really be taken out, and that should be the green space through all these health and well-being. The benefits to the community would enjoy. And at the very least, I mean, the area around about the playing fields and park, where the old Parkhead Hospital used to be, it's used by so many people that we seem to be having this policy where all the green spaces are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. They eventually won't have any green spaces left or any amenities left for people to enjoy. So although I welcome what Steve's saying about H7 could be put back in, I still feel that H3, whether it's in its entirety to be taken out or partially taken out, to give people the amenities that they've enjoyed for over 30 years, or almost 30 years.
Sorry, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. As I say, probably the councillor that stays the nearest to this, like 100 yards away. As I say, I've tried to be as neutral as possible with this, but it's just a point of clarification here. As I say, if we remove this vote here, if I vote to remove this from the plan at present, as I say, if DGHP or the developers come forward with a master plan before LDP2 comes into place, it will be judged under LDP, the present one. Would that disbar me for taking part in any discussion? Because I've made an opinion that this should be taken out of the plan.
Yeah, if somebody voted to take H3 out of the plan, would that be tantamount to a predetermination of any planning application that came up under LDP1?
First of all, probably the easier of the 2 points to answer. The first one is that yes, until such time as LDP2 becomes adopted, then the provisions of the current local development plan would be applied to the assessment and determination of any planning application in the short term. As to whether members are opening themselves up to a degree of difficulty in terms of a future planning application, should they take the view that it should come out of the current plan. I think as long as any decision that members might take is properly recorded and properly explained, then this is setting a policy framework and a policy context for the whole of the region. And I don't think that taking policy decisions on a site, on a plan which has not even yet been adopted, would necessarily create a difficulty in the short term. I would.
Councillor Hagman?
Thank you, Chair. It's just point of clarity really in regards to the DFSH3. There's a point marked allot gardens. Is that an active allotment garden scheme? My reason why I'm asking is it's my understanding that we as a council are developing a food growing network across our region, and I just wanted to know, is that currently an active allotment food growing area?
I think it is, but it's not actually in the area. It's not actually in H3, it's adjacent to H3, I think. All right.
Chair, there are active allotments in the area just immediately to the north of the site, but they're out with the active allotments are out with the site.
Can I just confirm there's actually 2 allotment gardens on here? There's one next to the playing fields marked, there's one north, and there's one to the west as well within the site. And it's the one within the site that I'm looking for clarification on.
Yeah, as far as we are aware, those are not in active use.
So Councillor Johnson, followed by Councillor Nicholson. Sorry, point of order.
Are members of the public allowed to approach councillors during the debate on this matter? Because I believe a member of the public just approached Councillor Johnson.
Yeah. What's the general ruling on that? I mean, can people be approached during the...
Can't say we've got anything written down about that, but generally members of the public are not allowed to speak. I'm not sure if any other members have got any thoughts about that, but I've certainly never seen it happen before, but we've certainly not got any rules about it. But members are not allowed. Only members can speak at meetings.
If it helps, before I was a councillor, I approached somebody in the council and I got to speak to them. I got told to get away. You're not allowed. So maybe that helps.
Okay. I think it's a
one of the things, just a clarification on that. I don't know about these allotment gardens within the site. Are you talking about the one that's in the red? Yeah. Well, that's part of the playfield just now.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to back up Councillor Campbell. This is a much-used piece of land with all forms of groups throughout the area, and it's one of the few playing fields at the moment where people can use without actually having to incur charges, which also encourages a more active lifestyle. It has been an open piece of space in Dumfries for much longer than 30 years. And I think for the sake of 70 houses, which is barely over 2% of the Dumfries housing allocation, it seems to be a bit excessive, taking away so much space just to provide 70 houses. And I would, again, agree with Councillor Campbell that we should really remove H3, either in all or largely remove H3 and reinstate H7, because there is a big issue on that side of town with accessible space. A lot of the space that is, people include as accessible actually isn't. It's locked space, and it's space that's used for other purposes. Just because it's sort of a nice wee green field, if nobody can get on it, it doesn't really achieve much. Whereas this particular area, like I say, is extensively used, and I would like to see it taken out.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Can I ask for a bit of clarification on this? Where the Parkhead loaning is, it's got Parkhead playing field in there, and then that playing field's getting kept, is it? Is that planned to be kept? You've got a bit of the field that leads onto the steps here, which is the allotment of the gardens, and that's a new piece that's being suggested, is it? And one thing, I used to stay across at the Annan Road, and it's not 30 years ago, and the hospital used to be there at one time, and then it was, it wasn't in use. It was it was in use, but it was being used for housing. And then there was the mortuary down the bottom as well, but after that was knocked down, it was then for social housing was getting built in the town, and there was then started caravans with all the amenities put in there for decanting people, and that was in where the old hospital used to be. And people did use it. I used it. I went, there's two parts there. There's Noble Hall Park, and there's allotment gardens there, just adjacent to them, which are used, and it has got a play park in it. If them playing fields are still there, across from the Parkhead loaning, and the allotment gardens are being proposed as well, I don't see much loss of amenity in that, apart from people walking their dog to do their business in it. And that's what the old hospital area is being used for, and nothing else. It's not really an amenity apart from dogs. And I used to take mine there as well, but anyway.
Is a particular point of clarification you want from Steve then in terms of what it actually means? Yeah.
Just on the field and on the
Yeah.
plan, I'm not too sure about that.
Okay, Chair, yeah, if I could maybe just clarify the plan that you're looking at, really, the only proposal is the allocation that's printed over the Ordnance Survey base map that happens to contain all this other wording. So that those are not proposals, they exist on the Ordnance Survey base map. So in terms of whether or not it's proposed, for example, to retain some of the things that are mentioned on there, that really is something that would be a requirement of a master plan. And certainly the allocation that we're proposing, i.e. the wider allocation, the bigger interpretation of DFS H3. If you look at the document that we circulated on pages 2, if you look at page 2 and also at the top of page 3, you'll see on the right hand side there what we're suggesting by way of amending what's in the proposed plan to beef up some of the master plan requirements. And in particular, there's the proposed addition of the wording, the site should also accommodate a variety of accessible public open space for the wider area. So we have suggested, should members be so inclined, that there is the possibility of beefing up the site guidance to make it clear that the master plans should address these issues. It's certainly not envisaged that the whole of that site would be developed. Going back to the point that I think Councillor Johnson raised, it certainly isn't envisaged that the whole of that site would be developed. And the 70 units could certainly be accommodated very comfortably with this wider range of other opportunities as well to improve open space provision and other local infrastructure.
Councillor John Campbell.
Thank you, Leader. I hear what Steve's saying about this provisions being put in there, but some of the provisions, I think they recommended having one football field, but not everybody plays football. I mean, the amenities that they have at the moment, and it's not just dog walkers, there's children that play there, there's all sorts that's going on there. If it was just dog walkers, yeah, you can understand that, but it's been a green space, it's been an amenity, it's been there, as Councillor Johnson says, over 30 years. I thought it was only near on 30 years, but if it's over 30 years, these are the things that we should protect. I mean, the policies, CF2 onwards, these are the things that we have to do. I mean, we're actually going against our own policies if we don't protect our green spaces. And that is the reason why I would like to see H3 taken out or partially taken out, but the area for the amenity, the green space, should be protected as green space.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I've similar views to the people who have spoken prior to me, but my concern is with regard to the master planning of whatever we decide to put in. We've got, my understanding was currently this site, along with the Marchfield site and the proposal for DFS H7, was all to be part of the current local development plan master planning. Now, the Marchfield site is just about built out. We've got DFS H2 coming on soon. Once that's all built out, there'll be a lot of congestion in the Lockerbie Road or the Edinburgh Road area. And one of the issues with this is the proposal for a link road. Now, if we go back to a master plan for the whole area, does that mean to say any link road could come once the whole thing's built out? Will a link road have to be put in at the start? Because the additional traffic that even if you take the hospital site without taking the playing field, on in and around, Barry Avenue, Crathy Avenue, not Barry Avenue, Crathy Avenue, Balmoral Avenue, all those roads, and I think they call it the Little Highlands there. How are we going to actually address that? Currently we had what was it called? Arterial routes plan when I first joined the council, and that was looking at getting link roads from Lockerbie Road through to the Annan Road to take traffic out of these residential areas. And if we're going to look at this as a site, we need to make sure those link roads are in place before we develop more housing to cause more problems in residential areas that are existing.
Steve, could you respond to that point about the link road and when it would be required to be put in?
Essentially, that would be a matter for consideration as part of the overall master plan in terms of looking at phasing and so on. So I don't think we could be prescriptive within the proposed plan about that. It would certainly be a point of detail that would be picked up in the master plan process. Yes, sorry, Chair. The requirement for a link road is certainly specified within the site guidance that's in the LDP and LDP2, so that the actual requirement is there and specified in policy, yes.
Councillor Dryburgh?
Thanks very much. I'm just looking at some of the questions that Councillor Hislop, and there are some answers there within the responses from officers to the councillors asked questions. I just want to answer the question on the SHIP. The Strategic Housing Improvement Plan has looked at this particular area under LDP. And as Councillor Martin said earlier on, if there was an application that came in under the LDP, then the potential is for that to go forward. If whoever the applicant would be had received some money under the Strategic Housing Improvement Plan and they put an objection in to our recommendation, then what would actually happen? Because they would actually get funding from the Scottish Government to build houses on a place that was under the LDP, which we are now saying potentially a master plan will be required to put that particular house in there. So what would actually happen there?
I think my understanding is that the developer would have the opportunity to make representations to the Scottish Government during the consultation period, but Steve could maybe clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be correct. It would be open to any party once we publish the proposed local development plan to make representation, lodge objections to it, and that they would be heard by an independent Scottish Government reporter, and that reporter's findings and recommendation would then be binding on us, and we would have to alter and amend the plan accordingly before we can adopt it. So we probably won't have the final say on a number of these issues if they continue to generate objections during the public consultation period. Then those objections will be considered by the Scottish Government reporter.
Councillor Martin and Councillor Davidson.
Just on a point that Councillor Hislop raised, as I say, in the resources meeting in April 2008, they actually agreed the purchaser would be responsible for the construction of the link road, and the purchaser would be responsible for construction of changing rooms, etc. Just to jog his memory, Ivor was actually at that meeting.
Councillor David.
Thank you, Leader. Maybe indulge a daft laddie question. If we go down the line of a master planning approach, does that empower the us as planning authority to say, for example, what proportion of the site should remain as protected open space or playing fields, or what effectively would a master planning approach actually involve with regard to those issues, given that they are clearly issues of significant public concern?
Well, certainly we would want to make sure that any master plan fully and properly reflected the requirements set out within LDP2 in terms of some of the points that are specifically mentioned here in terms of open space, playing pitch, link road, and so on. If we weren't satisfied that those had been properly addressed, then we wouldn't necessarily support the submitted master plan. The other point to make is that we would certainly expect that there will be engagement with the local community by the applicant or developer in developing that master plan, and that would certainly be one of our requirements, is that there should be full community engagement with that process.
It strikes me that a master planning approach retains a degree more control in the hands of the planning authority than relying on the reporter. That's just my observation.
I wonder, can I ask a stupid question as well? What actually is the process of the master planning process, and what's the role of the planning committee in approving the master plan?
Chair, well, certainly, first of all, I can assure there's no stupid questions this afternoon. All of these questions are extremely valid. The master plan itself would be submitted in support of any future planning applications. So if the master plan was felt to be not in accordance with the requirements of the local development plan, then that would be a basis on which an application could be not supported.
So the Planning Applications Committee will see the master plan along with the planning application and would take a judgment as to whether or not it was in accordance with the local development plan or indeed other planning considerations.
Yeah.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think, I don't know if Councillor Campbell put a motion forward to, if in that case I would put the motion forward, Chair, that we go with the recommendations offered by the officers on page 2, 3 and the top of page 4 for this particular part, and put that into the local development plan 2 stage.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, I would put, listening to the debate, I'd put the amendment in that H3 is taken out and H7 is reinstated on the grounds of the LDP policies CF2 and CF3 to safeguard open space around the park area.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion from Councillor Driver. Councillor Davidson.
Chairman, I'm content to support Councillor Driver's motion for the reasons I've given.
There's an amendment from Councillor John Campbell. Councillor Johnson?
I would second Councillor Campbell's amendment.
You second them there. Okay. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, if we agree to put DFSH7 back in, I think that's part of the proposal from the officers, and the landowner says he's not going to do it, does that make DFSH3 null and void because they can't do a master plan on the whole area because DFSH7 never comes across? Therefore, we should take it all out because it can't be achieved.
Steve?
Chair, certainly in response to the main issues report and the previous consultation that we've done, our understanding is that the owner of H7 would welcome its re-inclusion back into the plan. So therefore, we could expect some positive engagement and cooperation, hopefully, on that basis. If H7 were to remain out of the proposed LDP2, there's a strong probability that they would object to that at the next stage anyway.
Councillor Nicholson?
It's just on that. In the papers it says H7 beyond 2029. So in years, is that up to then, or is it beyond 2029? In other words, kicking over the net long grass for better words.
Chair, the reason for that is that this is certainly seen as a long-term development and expansion opportunity, and I think, as I outlined previously, there are a number of constraints on the site, not least of which some of the flooding issues that require longer-term investigation and the development of proposals based on that. So there'll be requirements for a fully comprehensive flooding impact study and a fully comprehensive drainage study before we could contemplate looking at detailed proposals for that element of the site. However, there's no reason why a master plan couldn't be developed in the shorter term, certainly to address things like possible phasing, for example.
What's the situation in the current LDP with regard to H7? I mean, is it beyond 2029 or is it got different?
It is currently a long-term allocation in the current LDP.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, my understanding is that the existing LDP H7 is already there, and it was just to retain that and take out H3.
Councillor Nicholson?
But for all the reasons, is that, are you saying it would start now as part of the plan, or would the housing then not be developed, be able to be developed until 2029 after some other kind of master plan? If in other words, everything be out until that site had the ability to be. So is it now you're proposing it? Are you proposing it for it to be up to 2029?
Yeah, up to 2029.
Okay. Councillor Dryburgh?
So I was just looking at a point of order about, there's been a motion and an amendment being brought forward, and there's been discussion after that motion and amendment. I'm just wondering what the process is now.
I think we're just trying to get clarification on the amendment that H7 is either a more immediate option or a long-term option. It'll be reinstated to be. So I think you've said it'll be reinstated as a long-term option. Yeah.
It's just further clarification, Leader. If I understand DGHP have bought H3 on the basis of the current LDP, and we take it out, are we then liable to be held to account because they've bought land on the basis of your current plan and suddenly we decide to change it?
They would, of course, have up till the adoption of LDP2 to submit an application under the current plan. But Steve, is it dangerous for us in any respect?
Well, it's the same with any site, really. If there is a site that's allocated in the current LDP, then a planning application submitted will be assessed on the basis of what's in the current LDP. If a developer is an owner of a site that is in the current LDP, and there are other examples of this, and a site is going to be deallocated for whatever reason, then there's nothing to stop them coming in with a planning application to be determined under the current allocation.
I just wonder, Leader, about the merits even trying to take it out, because if they submit an application of any kind before 2019, we are then obliged to consider that application irrespective of how long it takes to find its way through to a situation where it might be approved. And I'm sure I'm right in that respect, that if the application is made under the current LDP policy, irrespective of the introduction of a subsequent one, we are still obliged to consider that application on the previous LDP. So I just wonder if it merits the debate at all.
Indeed, and also DGHP would have the right to object. As I said earlier, they could object to the provisions of the new LDP and ask the reporter to put it back in. So anyway, Councillor Hislop.
It's a point of clarification. Has the process changed from previous, I think it was structure plans when back in 1999 or whenever we did that, and previous local plans? Because at that time, at this point, we are agreeing, my understanding is, our proposals for the plan. Therefore, it would carry weight going forward as a material consideration in any planning application. And going back to those dreaded days of Tinrun, we had sisted applications and various other things that caused problems whereby you didn't hear them until you adopted the new plan. What is the situation now? Has that changed, or would that still apply?
I think if Steve could answer that point of clarification, and then I think we need to proceed to the vote.
Well, in answer to the first point, yes, the planning system has been radically changed since the days of structure plans. There is now a complete new planning system in place and has been for the last 8 or 9 years. The weight that you can give to an emerging plan very much depends on where you are in the process. However, legally, the council is still obliged to first and foremost consider applications in accordance with the adopted development plan. Now, one of the material considerations as we get later on in the process might well be the emerging policy position in LDP2. However, we can't give any weight to that whatsoever in the early stages of the process because the plan could change quite drastically, particularly after the examination stage. So the advice would be certainly prior to knowing the outcome of the examination, we shouldn't really give any weight to the LDP2 at all because particularly contentious policies or sites could be changed and altered by the reporter.
Thank you. Rona, can you remind us of the
certainly
motion and the amendment, please?
Certainly do my best. We have a motion proposed by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Davidson, and that is to incorporate the amendments suggested by officers on pages 2 following into the draft plan. And we have an amendment by Councillor Campbell, John Campbell, seconded by Councillor Johnston, which is to remove site H3 from the plan and reinstate H7, but as a long-term option beyond 2029. Okay. Leader?
Motion.
Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Diggy Campbell?
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell?
Amendment.
Councillor Ian Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Amendment.
Councillor Howie? Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Little?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall? Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McClelland?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee? Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson?
Motion.
Councillor Ronnie?
Amendment.
Councillor Sloan? What's going on? Councillor Stitt?
Motion.
Councillor Surtees?
Amendment.
Councillor Tate?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson? Not here. He's not taking part. Councillor Wilson?
Motion.
Councillor Wood? Yeah, sorry.
Abstain.
Okay. Councillor John Young? He's not taking part. Yeah, he's declared an interest. Right, okay. The amendment is carried 18 votes to 14 with 1 abstention.
Okay, we can get Councillor Wood, sorry, Councillor Young to come back. Thank you. Now, the next is site DFS H4, if anyone has an interest in that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Reasonably straightforward request to be considered. I think the policy in LDP2 in relation to this site, as it currently stands, doesn't include reference to a master plan being required to guide the future development of the site. And our response to that, which is outlined in the document that you have, is that we certainly would be comfortable with revised wording to include that requirement. So on page 102 of your main papers, we would recommend including reference to the master plan within the site guidance, and the revised wording is shown there on your document that you have had circulated on page 4 of that document. Happy to take any questions on that one.
Sorry, Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's just that we're putting in a master plan will be required for the site, setting out a high quality layout and design. My understanding, this is going to appeal this site that was in the newspaper the other day. So if we put in a master plan required, yet half the site's developed, how can we get a master plan for the whole site?
Steve.
Well, first of all, we can't prejudge the outcome anyway of the appeal situation. So any planning application that comes forward in the future, we would apply the policy that is in force at that particular time. So in the short term, we would have to apply the policy that's in the current local development plan. Should things become even more protracted, then we would apply the new policy in LDP 2 to the situation.
Does that satisfy? I'm happy to agree with the new wording, the master plan. Yep, excellent. Okay.
The next site that has been requested for inclusion within the proposed plan is a site at Mavis Grove in Dumfries, DFS H255. This is a site, there's a lot of history to this site in terms of previous plans and previous moves to have this included by the landowner. This is the location of the site, and the plan was circulated to you with the document that you've been given. So this is the site. The reason that it wasn't included within the proposed plan, it was submitted by the owner, and it was assessed as part of the process that we went through of assessing all potential opportunities before finalising the ones that should go forward into the proposed plan. The assessment concluded that this site is quite remote from the main settlement of Dumfries and doesn't really represent a logical expansion or extension to the town. It would create new development in an unsustainable location rather than some of the other sites that have been identified within the Dumfries settlement area where they are much more accessible from the point of view of facilities, infrastructure, public transport and so on. So for those reasons, this site was not included in the draft of the proposed plan that's included with your papers. I'm happy to for us to take questions, any questions that you might have on that one.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Given the last decision, how does that sit with the last sentence about sufficient housing sites are proposed to be included in LDP to meet the housing land requirement? if we say no to, or we suggest no to the Navy's growth, what knock-on impact will it have on that housing land requirement, given we've just decided not to have 70 on the Annan Road?
Yeah, but we have also, my understanding is that part of that decision is to reintroduce a larger site, H7, so certainly the long-term housing land requirement is still capable of being met. And if there was a deficiency, then there may be other sites that are better located, in our view, than this one.
Thanks, Steve. It was a technical question. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. In recent times, we all received documentation from Holder Planning, which gave me and I think a few other members a good chance to see some expert independent input into our deliberations and thoughts for the LDP. Some of the points that jumped out to me from the Holder Planning documentation made sense. The LDP's vision is that Dumfries will be the regional centre, and yet we are only allocating 50% of their weighting to Dumfries within Dumfries housing market, which extends up to Sanquhar. Holder felt that should be around 70%. I think that makes a bit of sense, and if one takes that on board, then that equates to a shortfall. Another point was our LDP aims for a 20% sort of margin or buffer in our figures. I would say this is highly questionable because many of the sites in Dumfries are legacy sites, and speaking to somebody new to the process, I would look at these and think, well, nothing happened for a long period of time, and that must put doubts on their viability. So then we move on to the actual need for liquidity. The 20%, I think, is more of a margin for error, but you need liquidity in a market for things to move, and so I would argue that we need on the side of an oversupply rather than risking an undersupply, and it should be a fresh supply of sites which are, in some sense, exciting to developers and are geographically spread around the town. So the positioning of this one, where it is around 5 o'clock or so, is a new potential part of the town where there is space to do things, and the sort of geographical centre of gravity of the town has moved somewhat given the position of the new hospital, and I think the market needs to decide which direction the town is going to expand in the future. I mean, there have been meetings in the past, and I suppose it would be done if the budget was there to create a link across the eastern edge of the town, be it by a bridge or a bypass extension, etc. And that could well happen in the fullness of time. This is a flat site, and it has good access, and connections are all suitable. And so there were points raised about agriculture. Looking at it in depth, the site is constricted on all sides, so it's not very suitable for stock handling, and it's too small for modern arable farming. Again, the scenic issue is raised, but it is flat, and I think that's down to the architecture that would come in development to look at that aspect. Its detachment from the town, well, I think I've addressed that. I think we should offer all parts of the town a chance for expansion, and I don't think this is really disconnected from the town. There are buildings there already. So, in short, I think we need to support this viable site and to try to add impetus to what's otherwise a sort of moribund housing market in Dumfries. And I understand there have been indications that this is a site likely to go ahead with a significant proportion of social housing within it. And just to go back a stage to the liquidity thing, we have a policy H4 which is highly restrictive to developments outside the settlement boundary. So if this remains outside the settlement boundary, it almost says no matter how good the project comes forward, every last site would have to be fully exploited within the town to make it possible for us to have a site outside the town. So it's critical that we have that liquidity within the town boundary. So for all of the above, I would move that we definitely include this Mavis Grove in our LDP. Thank you.
Councillor Dempster and Councillor Nicholson.
given what's set out, the explanation's been given, it's quite clear this site has been floated for dozens of occasions in the past, and I would suggest we simply propose we go with the officer's recommendation, as set out on page 4 and 5.
And Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second that, given the last debate as well about amenities and that as well. You'll notice there's paths here across from the Kingham Park as well. So all the locals from Taquerin and that use that path to walk their dogs up that area. So on that basis, I'm quite happy to second.
Is there a seconder for Councillor James's motion? Councillor Carruthers. Right.
The motion is Councillor Dempster, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, which is to go with the officer's recommendations. The amendment is Councillor James's, seconded by Councillor Carruthers, which is to include the Mavis Grove site within the LDP 2. Okay, we'll just proceed to the vote. Leader?
Motion.
Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Campbell, Doogie Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor John Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Dryburgh's gone. Sorry. Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman's gone. Councillor Howie? Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnson?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Little?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall?
Motion.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McClelland?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson?
Motion.
Councillor Stitt?
Motion.
Councillor Surtees?
Motion.
Councillor Tate? Councillor Wilson?
Motion.
Councillor Wood?
Amendment.
Councillor Young?
Motion.
The motion is carried 21 votes to 10.
Thank you. We can, I think Councillor Ronnie is to come back in. He's gone, okay. Okay, next up is Annan, and I think, Councillor McClelland had declared an interest in that.
Okay, so that concludes the Dumfries sites that have been raised as issues with us. Moving on to Annan, and we have received a proposal that an additional housing site, which is referred to as Ann H204 Watchhaw, should be included, and the reasoning is outlined there. The proposed plan should be more ambitious in allocating housing sites in Annan as an important district centre, and we should be anticipating future growth driven by the initiatives like the Borderlands Initiative and the redevelopment of Chapel Cross, and that the site at Watchhaw is suitable for allocation as a housing site. I'll just identify for you, you've got the plan with your documents. So the site sits, the superstore there, that for those of you that are familiar with Annan, that's the Tesco on the east side of Annan. There's a site immediately behind the Tesco which is allocated within the proposed plan, So this further site would sit behind that. It is a site that was submitted to us earlier in the process through the call for sites and main issues report. So it has been assessed, and you'll see on the handout there, there are a number of constraints that would need to be addressed in bringing this site forward. However, having said that, given some of the wider settlement constraints in Annan, this realistically is the only direction for possible future expansion of Annan. And I think if you look at the proposed plan that's in front of you with your papers, in particular, if you look at page 114, you'll see that in the allocation for the smaller site that we have recommended for inclusion, there's actually reference in there to the fact that there is a wider or longer term development opportunity associated with the adjoining site, and that when developers bring forward proposals for that smaller site, they should take recognition of the need for it to be integrated into a larger development opportunity. So there is a chance that this site was actually going to come forward in future plans in any event. So if members were minded to introduce this as a long-term option just now, certainly that wouldn't give us any great concerns as officers. Happy to take questions again.
Questions? Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think this one probably came from a bit of research and actually through our campaigns, information that was forthcoming from other places, but I'll put it into context. I think my thoughts in regards to this, just take me a couple of minutes and I'll keep it to that. Annan Housing Market Area comes from Roughwell. It goes right through Beckelfeck and Eaglesfield, down Capati Fleming and across to a Gretna border, which is Gretna Springfield, and the coastline follows it back up to Roughwell, which takes in Annan East Riggs. And that's one of the 6 housing market areas within Dumfries and Galloway. So within that, you've got the allocation in Annan. So the 10-year supply that's proposed at this moment in time for Annan is about 9,500 people. It fluctuates in about there at any one time. So we've got in Annan 406 is residential units proposed over the next 10 years once this has been formally adopted. And in the Gretna border area is Gretna Springfield predominantly, which is about 3,500 people. So it's about a third of the size of Annan, and there's 723 residential units proposed in that area. And there's a rather large constraint when it comes to accessing public drinking water there, and there's very limited building in that area. So we've got a smaller settlement which is taking up the majority of the housing, available housing stock we can actually build, the land that is. It's got a large amount of constraints. Annan we've got the Borderlands Initiative, which we're all aware of. I'm sure we'll all be up to speed on that over the next couple of months. That's got real potential. Chapel Cross site in particular, we see developments there. And that lends itself to Annan growing and expanding the local economy in that area. So I just think when we looked at this, where else could Annan expand? Felt it was an under provision, and as Steve's already outlined, this is the natural site to expand, whether in whole or whether in part. And actually, I agree with what has been outlined by the officials and Steve in regards to the longer term. This is not about a short term fix for Annan. This is looking at a longer vision, probably is beyond 2029. We're looking at here, so in real terms, what's being proposed, I think, in this statement, is this site either in whole or in part being allocated, and it's beyond the 2029 allocation, and it future-proofs, and as things develop with Borderlands, so on and so forth, and taking into consideration the constraints in the Gretna border area, and this plan's all about achievability at the end of the day. I think it's only fair that Annan gets its fair share of opportunity when it comes to housing as well. I think that probably sums it up, Leader. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, it was really just to go with the officer's recommendations on the basis that Ian's quite right, they've identified 406 units. What the officer's comments I don't think, they don't explain fully is with regards to the the emphasis in Annan at the moment with regards to the master plan is to look at opportunities with a number of brownfield sites which are being actively pursued and working with the planners. So although it says 406 units, there is a number of brownfield opportunities within the settlement boundaries that are nearer to the town centre. Because one of the main issues that came out with the master plan and one of the things that we're working on is to try and develop more housing near to the town centre. So I feel this could be a long term, but if you were to actually bring that forward to short term, that might discourage some of the developments within the brownfield sites within Annan.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. I'm kind of minded to go along with the recommendations as well, but I think there's something we need to take into consideration here. The Borderlands project and the South of Scotland enterprise being set up isn't for Gretna and Langham and Eastriggs, it's for the whole of Dumfries and Galloway. And I actually think we need, it's Ian's point about needing to expand a bit further out than those very obvious markets with Carlisle connotations, because if you think about it, if you know, the M74 is the main arterial route and the quickest one, I would suggest, you know, you've got other places and towns and villages a bit further north, but not that far north, who actually would be looking to benefit from this as well. So I think I'm happy to go along with the officer recommendations, but I think we also need to keep an eye, a real eye on how we develop our housing for potential commuters going back and forth because of the new economic development processes that are taking place.
Councillor Gravis.
No, I mean, I think the point that Councillor Marshall made is valid, and that's why I think it's a long term and it should be put to beyond 2029. I think that's valid enough. That's absolutely appropriate. But I think coming back to what's fit for purpose, I suppose, and achievable, going back to the comments I made about Gretna border, and it's not about Gretna, Langham or Annan borderlands, but specifically we got an exempt item without getting into too much detail, because we certainly can't do that. But there's opportunities in the Chapel Cross and Annan when it comes to Borderlands Initiative. That's never been hidden. And Annan will need to expand. So in Annan, we're looking at about a 4.5 to 5% growth potential over the 10-year housing supply compared to the size of settlement. In Gretna Border, looking at beyond 25%. It's disproportionate, to say the least. And ultimately, I think there may well be political reasons why Gretna Border, for maybe the right political reasons, why Gretna Border has such a high allocation of housing when it comes to Scottish Water's infrastructure and how we can possibly lever that in. But there's potential of not being able to achieve I suppose, maximising the economic benefit in the Annan area. I think it's like, say, Sean's right when he says, listen, we are focusing in Annan High Street, Cars Billington's old site, other brownfield sites. We've got really one other site in Annan that's been achievable. This is the next natural place. So I think now, if planning is about planning ahead, that ultimately it's development management. How do we manage that development in a sustainable manner? And I think, this should be allocated either all in whole or in part. And come back to it's Annan's open for opportunities. A lot of good business people in that area. 4.5% is what we're seeing is the growth potential over the next, it's 12 years from now, I think 11, 12 years. In Gretna, we're seeing that as being 25% compared to the size of the settlement with the infrastructure constraints that are there. I would imagine if representations come forward in regards to this, there would be real questions asked by the reporter.
Councillor Brodie, followed by Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, listen to Mr. Rogers. I don't think there's a problem with including this site because it's a logical one to include for the future. So I would support including it.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just after Councillor Curzon, we can take the debate back to this particular site. I would like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendations and leave H204 out, but of course consider it at a future date post 2029.
I'm advised it could be put in for post 2029 as a long-term site. I mean, how would you be content? Yeah. Yes. So how does that? Are you prepared to agree to that?
Sorry, Leah, I think what you're saying. So I'm just a little bit.
The suggestion has been made to me that it could be included, but post 2029, and I think other councillors have indicated that they would be content
Yeah, I'd be absolutely fine with that, Leader. It's not a short-term fix, it's about planning ahead, future-proofing the needs of Annan. There's potential, growth potential in, well, Dumfries and Galloway, but I'm talking specifically looking at Annan at this particular time here, so I think we should future-proof it, and it's no further, it'll not be built in the next 5 years, this term, this local development plan, but at least there's an indication of what direction we're heading in potentially.
Okay. Steve?
Chair, yes, thank you. Given that the council is minded to have this site included, would you be content to delegate to us to develop the site guidance that would need to be incorporated into the policy that goes into the LDP2? I would suggest that we need to cover as a minimum a requirement for a flood risk assessment, transport assessment, and an archaeological assessment, together with a requirement for an overall master plan to be developed. But we can work that wording up and include it into the proposed plan.
Okay. Are members content? Yeah. Councillor Marshall?
Just within the general statement now for Annan as well, I think there needs to be a little bit of emphasis about the concentration on developing the brownfield sites as per the master plan. I think there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on that, and that will allow for these longer term development sites to be developed once we've actually exhausted all the potential nearer to the town centre.
Content with that?
Well, Chair, yes, I was going to say that when you look at the planning objectives that are identified for Annan in the proposed plan on page 113, the third of those does quite clearly state to support in principle the redevelopment of brownfield opportunities as identified in the Annan Regeneration Master Plan to aid the regeneration of the town. So I think we have captured that point, and it is a good point, and it's certainly something that's not reflected in allocations. So there will be more housing comes forward than is indicated in the allocations because of these business relocations and site redevelopments that opportunities that have been identified.
Thanks. Okay, we can content with that. We'll move on to Castle Douglas. Has Henry got an interest in Castle Douglas as well?
Yeah, so just moving on to Castle Douglas. This site has been raised with us, which is a site on the east side of an SB road. For those of you that are familiar with Castle Douglas, it sits adjacent to where the Tesco in Castle Douglas is, and this was a site that was put into the plan following the previous examination process. So it was put into the previous or current local development plan by the reporter following representation from the site owner. The reason that the current proposed local development plan doesn't include this site is that we had, first of all, concerns about whether or not the site was effective, in that we had received no indication from the owner as to whether and how they intended to actually bring it forward for development. And secondly, I think it also reflects our wider concern about the location of this site, first of all, on a prominent and important gateway route into Castle Douglas, and secondly, adjacent to existing industrial and commercial activity, which may be incompatible with this as a housing site. So for those various reasons, it wasn't carried forward, and we weren't proposing to carry it forward into LDP2. I'm happy to take any questions on that one.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Well, normally my presumption would be against development on main approaches to towns, but that's only a subjective hang up that I've got, because I just don't think we're good on architecture, particularly in the context of new build against historic architecture. But the thing is, here in Castle Douglas, most sites suffer from either access problems, multi-ownership difficulties or in some cases insolvency. And talking to the owners of this particular site, they are actually involved with most of the other sites in the town, or certainly around the perimeter of the town, and they're of the opinion that this is their most likely, or in the short term, only likely one to go ahead. So there are reservations about the site, scenic reservations and the proximity to light industry, but I think they can be adequately addressed in a detailed planning, I hope. A certain amount of screening from the road, it falls away a little bit, and it's only light industry that it's close to. Castle Douglas itself is in a sort of delicate period of its development, and it definitely needs fresh impetus, and I think we can't afford to be hemmed in there, so I would move for the inclusion of this site, please.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, maybe you could explain why, in this instance, you're taking one out of the local plan because it's next to an industrial site, yet earlier on that didn't seem to be an issue. Heath Hall comes to mind.
Chair, just to be clear, that's not the prime reason that we didn't carry the site forward. The prime reason was that we had concerns about its effectiveness, in that we had no real certainty that the site was actually going to be brought forward and developed. And the prime reason for allocating housing sites is that they should be considered as effective in the short term. And we had received no information from the owners or their agents to provide any reassurance around that.
Okay, we've got any further comments? Councillor Wood.
To ask Steve, this was put into the last plan by the reporter. Can you give us an indication why the reporter felt it was suitable to be put into our local development plan?
If I can recall correctly, I mean, I don't know if we've got any information available on the previous examination. It is a matter of public record and will be available on the Scottish Government Inquiry Reporters Unit website. But the reporter accepted the submissions of the owner of the site, that the site would, in their view, represent a good and viable housing site that was needed in the town.
Thanks, Councillor Wood.
I'm just thinking in terms of if we were to go along with the proposals and it is it is taken out of our plan and there is representation once again, is the reporter likely to change his position or her position?
I think the thing that's changed in the interim period is that additional sites within Castle Douglas have been identified and are included in the plan. So there are a number of other housing opportunities that have been developed. So I think the argument about there being an overriding need to release this particular site would certainly need to be revisited. Obviously, I can't prejudge or preempt what the outcome of that might be, but the circumstances are different.
Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Leader. I think I would support what Councillor James has been saying in regards to retaining this as a site, as an identified site. My understanding is that it's predominantly the same landowner in Castle Douglas that controls a lot of these sites. I would imagine they're just hedging their bets when it comes to removing the other sites or maybe being opportunistic. But I mean, I think ultimately the reporter, unless there's clear evidence other than possibly speculation, that if the reporter was to see this put in front of them again, they'd probably come to the same conclusion. Especially, so I would support certainly Councillor James and even seconding it if needed in regards to a motion.
Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. This site, for clarification is where the agricultural show used to be. It's next to the Tesco store, which is one of the busiest stores in the region. I have concerns about traffic coming onto this site. The site falls away very quickly, and I really have grave concerns about traffic if this was developed as a housing site coming onto a very busy Nesby Road. So I would support the officer's recommendations.
Okay. Right, so we've got a motion and an amendment.
I'll second that.
A motion and an amendment.
Okay. Yeah, the motion is to include the Ernstby Road, and the amendment is to go with the officer's recommendations to keep it out of this LDP. Leader?
Amendment.
Deputy Leader?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Doogie Campbell?
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Ian Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster? Who's gone? Councillor Fairbairn?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti?
Motion.
Councillor Councillor Howie? Not here because he's got an interest. Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls?
Motion.
Councillor James?
Motion.
Councillor Johnson? Councillor Lever?
Amendment.
Councillor Little?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin? Councillor McClelland?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment.
Councillor Councillor Nicholson?
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Motion.
And Councillor Young?
Amendment.
Motion is carried 14 votes to 11.
Thank you. We can move on now to Cross Michael.
Moving on to Cross Michael, we've had a representation concerning the housing site CMI H202, which is on page 133 of the main report. And the representation simply states that that site should be deleted because of concerns about the impact of the site on the setting of the church in Cross Michael, which is listed, and also the fact that it's adjacent to the cemetery and may well limit future expansion options for that, and therefore members should consider deleting the site. I think our view of the site is this is a very minor allocation within the village, and should members be minded to remove it from the plan, that wouldn't create any difficulties in terms of housing land supply figures and so on. So it's certainly something that could be considered. Happy to take questions.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, as mentioned, this is a small site which doesn't really address the need for housing in Cross Michael, or a possible need. And the Community Council, I believe, are against this because it hems in the cemetery. But my own feeling about it is that it actually would destroy the view of the church, which is the village's iconic building, and that view would be just destroyed as you approach it from the north. I mean, it's already not helped on the southern side by a building right in front of it. I've got a couple of pictures here, and when you can see it in its full glory, it's fantastic. And for the sake of 2 or 3 sites, I don't think this would be a welcome or useful addition. So I favour the deletement of this.
Councillor John Young.
Thank you, Chair. I actually agree with every word that Councillor James has said, so I would support this removal.
Is anybody otherwise minded? Do we agree? Okay. Now the second one, Cross Michael, the extension to land at Templand.
This is a second site that's been raised with us in Crossmichael. This is a site that sits to the rear of existing fairly recent development in Templand in the village. That's the larger site. The dotted line shows what has come forward by way of a proposal, which is that we should look at a part or a smaller site. The larger field that sits within was assessed following the call for sites and main issues report. And for those of you that were involved in the previous or the current local development plan and the process we went through for that, it was also looked at as part of that process and generated certainly a significant amount of community concern was raised at that time when this opportunity was first being looked at. The site wasn't taken forward into LDP2 for a number of reasons that were outlined on your handout. Obviously, this is a much smaller development site that's now being proposed, albeit it would still have some impact on the landscape and the landscape setting of the village in this location. I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has on this one.
Okay. Councillor James.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, at the start, it was characterised as a large site at the northern edge of the settlement, lower parts of the site suitable, other sites available. Since then, all other sites, apart from the one also in this picture, have disappeared from Crossmichael, and this site, the site that's left in, is conjoining with this proposed new site, or new addition to the local plan, or reintroduction to the local plan, and it's in the same ownership. Even if the other sites hadn't dropped out, there would be no sites capable of accommodating the type of expansion that we've seen twice in my lifetime in Crossmichael. Crossmichael does tend to grow, and I think we should allow for that. Taking the site specifically, the area marked out lies at the same height as the houses southwest of it, so it doesn't actually ride up the hill as you might think if you stood in the left side of this diagram and looked. You have a rise in front of you, but to the right side behind the existing houses it doesn't rise up, and it would sit very snugly and comfortably in the landscape. So I think since Crossmichael does need room for expansion, this is tucked away snug. It's next to quite a recent development. I can't see anything at all against this inclusion, and I would like it to be included.
Further comments? Any views contrary to those expressed by Councillor James? Members happy to go along with the proposal? Yep. Okay. Right, we're moving on to Eastriggs now.
Leader, just before I move on to the Eastrigg one, could I just clarify that if that site's going to be included, that you delegate to us authority to develop the site guidance, and we would incorporate the site as an expanded or extended H1 to make that all one larger allocation. That's okay.
We're content with that? Yes, that's good. Okay.
The next opportunity that has been raised with us by members in their submissions concerns a site in Eastriggs, and the representation is to the effect that the site is not considered to be effective and will never be developed. It's not within the current strategic housing improvement plan. investment plan. And it should be allocated as open space. So the site ERLH1, which is the allocation that we were proposing to make in the plan, is on page, if you look at page 143 and 144 of the papers, you'll see the site that we're talking about. It is a relatively minor site with a capacity of up to 10 units. There are other larger sites for future development already allocated within the village. So the loss of a housing site of that small scale wouldn't be significant, although clearly members need to be mindful that the site was promoted to us through the call for sites and main issues process by the owner, which is DGHP. Happy to take questions.
Okay. Councillor Crothers and Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Leader. Just a wee bit of background information in regards to this. I think it was Councillor Lever, Councillor Collins and myself. The Housing Committee decided to send us up as a cross-party lobby into the then Housing Minister, Alec Neil, and we had the conversation. One of the items to lobby on was the removal of the clawback that the Scottish Executive stroke government, executive at the time when it was brought into place, when the transfer of the council housing stock to DGHP took place, there was a lot of debt written off. But as a clawback arrangement, there was an agreement put in place that any land that DGHP either sold or developed, there would be an allocation of funds to either the value or the sale price. That would go towards the repayment of the debt. That was the clawback arrangement. So we lost that. Well, we put the conversation to the then Housing Minister, and my understanding is that has not changed whatsoever. That clawback arrangement is still in place. Now I would imagine, having spoke to DGHP, this would be a procedural thing that was put forward. It's already outlined by Steve. It's not in a strategic housing and investment plan. When it comes to actual social housing allocation in that Eastriggs area, actually Cunningham Housing Association are looking at a site, and that's actually been identified and included as one of the sites in Eastriggs. So the social housing is actually being addressed, the needs there as well as the private sector needs. And I think that's why this is here. It will not be built on. DGHP do not build on their own land, and we can see that across the piece. Parkhead's another example where they bought that off us, whether it ever gets developed. I know there's other pieces of land where they don't build on their own land because that clawback arrangement forbids them to do that because it makes it financially unsustainable and unviable. So the local community, the people and the community council have objected to this. They do want it removed, they want it to be allocated as open space. Now, if for some reason that clawback arrangement was to be, we're still to lobby more, and it was to be taken away, and the Scottish Government had a different view in regards to that, then it could be reallocated possibly as housing at a later point in time. But I think it is in the best interests of the Eastriggs and the local community in that area that we actually remove this and allocate it as open space as per the what's been put forward, in not from the officials' perspective, but actually from the members' perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Really just to support what Ian said, I mean, this has been an issue that DGHP have been approached on a number of occasions with regards to what plans they have for this piece of land, and they said they didn't, they had no plans to either sell that on to a potential developer or develop it themselves. So Eastriggs Community Council have, debated this, and they would like that. There's limited open space in Eastriggs at the moment. So I think it's right and proper that there's been no plans for this over the last 15 years. And whether or not it's open space or white land, because there is maybe potential development for a community, some sort of community use, etc. And if DGHP own it at the moment, then they have to continue to maintain it. But totally support this one.
Councillor Brodie, and then Councillor Hislop.
Yeah, I see the potential for this site for sort of special housing for elderly people and disabled people, because it is the site that's most central within Eastriggs. So I wouldn't like to throw that possibility out in the future, because there is a need in Eastriggs for that. So if we decide not to put it in the plan, what would be the consequence? Obviously, DGP have asked for this. What would be the consequence if DGHP were able to avoid this clawback and come back with a proposal for that land? What would happen if they did that at a future date?
Well, I think if there was a view that at some point in the future development proposals of whatever nature, whether that's for community facilities or sheltered housing or whatever, might come forward, then rather than designating this as open space, it would probably be better just left as white land within the settlement boundary, and then proposals can be considered on their merits when they come forward. If it gets allocated as open space, then what that means is that there's a presumption against development of any type in the future.
Okay. Councillor Brodie?
I would prefer that if the local members would think of that. Thank you.
Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I was just going to say I would rather remove it and leave it as white land so that it could come forward in the future.
I think there's consensus over that. Am I correct? Okay. Excellent. And moving on to Lochmaben, and Councillor McClellan can return.
So moving on to Lochmaben, this is the Laverock Horse site in Lochmaben, which is allocated, is proposed to be allocated in the proposed plan for a housing development of some 60 units capacity. The issue that's been raised with us through the member representation expresses concerns about the access into this site. And that essentially the concern that without viable or feasible plans for accessing the site, then the site should actually just be removed from LDP2. The site currently, as it sits in the plan, is on page 180 of your documents this afternoon. The site itself. Sorry, the site itself is really the only development opportunity of any size or scale within Lochmaben. Lochmaben as a district centre within our settlement hierarchy is somewhere that should be capable of accommodating new development. Certainly it provides a focus for local facilities and infrastructure, and therefore would be expected to accommodate its share of new development in the future. So if the site were to be taken out, that would leave Lochmaben with no development sites at all, and that certainly would be an issue and a concern about how future needs are to be met. And for those reasons, the site was included. The concerns about roads access were certainly flagged up to us earlier in the process, and following further consultation with roads, there were some changes and adjustments made to this site before it was put into the proposed plan to highlight the need for access and road improvements alongside this development to be made. So happy to take any questions on that one.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just as a little bit of setting it almost, if you like, I have concerns about the access from Moss Vale. It's a very narrow stretch of road with a number of parked cars, mainly because there's a steep gradient up to the houses on one particular side of Moss Vale, which means that the only option for car parking for residents is on street. Moss Vale is also a very narrow road with the pavement only on one side at points as well. And of course, if this was to be included in plans for housing come forward, you would see another 30 properties accessing the village centre, the town centre, if you like, from Moss Vale, and I'm not entirely sure if the infrastructure of Moss Vale would be able to cope with that, but if there is further information, I would appreciate that.
Well, Chair, as I say, certainly we've consulted very closely with roads before including this site in the proposed LDP, and any plans that come forward would certainly have to address the access issues to their satisfaction. But that's a detail that would be considered at the planning application stage. At this point in time, we're simply seeking through the allocation to establish that the principle of housing development on this site would be acceptable, subject to these issues that are highlighted there on page 180 being addressed in any submission, and that does include a recognition that there would be a requirement, first of all, to have 2 points of access to the site, one of which must be from Moss Vale, and that local improvements within the existing road network at Moss Vale are likely to be required. So the detail of that would be considered at a planning application stage.
Councillor Fabian.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Leader. Just to kind of reiterate what Andrew's saying, yeah, Moss Vale was very, very narrow stretch of road, so we'd have to see what kind of proposed development you would put in place for that. Also, speaking to the residents in Lochmaben, Marjorie Banks and Franken Heights are definitely not an area we should be proposing to put an access route into either.
Do you have any proposals, Councillor Wilson?
I think, to be honest, Leader, I'd like to propose that this site is removed from LDP2. Essentially, interesting enough, it's actually the remaining site from Lochmaben that was in the original the last local development plan. Those other sites that were identified in that plan have actually now got houses built on, and essentially access is always going to be a problem to this site. It hasn't been able to be solved over the last couple of years, and I don't see Moss Vale as one access point to it, and Rankin Heights, or a possibility of Marjorie Banks being access to the site as a possible option. I don't think either of them are likely to come to fruition, and I would like to propose that it's removed from the development plan.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Fabian? Yeah. Any alternative proposition? Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Just for clarity, that means then there will be no new development, housing development in Lochmaben for the foreseeable future. Am I right? Okay, in that case...
That's correct. That was the point that we made at the beginning there, was that that would mean that there's no, other than any infill or windfall development opportunities that come along, there is no significant new housing development envisaged or planned for Lochmaben for the duration of this plan period. So local needs and requirements would not be met, and as has just been mentioned, there is clearly a demand, because the sites that have previously been identified have now been taken up and built out.
Councillor Crothers?
So, I mean, I'm always keen to hear what members are saying, but I suppose going back to some of the comments I made earlier, Grantor Border's not that much difference between the size between Grantor Springfield and Lochmaben. There's no massive difference. 723 units allocated. Lochmaben's got 60, which is marginal to say the least. Just thinking in the bigger picture, taking this away, they've got nothing other than what might be seen as opportunistic within the settlement boundary that's there. I mean, I would find it difficult to support removing this particular site just for those reasons. It's disproportionate. It's not a massive site, but I understand exactly where the members are coming from in regards to local issues, the difficulties that come with them. I've knocked these doors. I've had the same issues coming up. So I would have difficulty supporting Axel to take this out when there's no other even opportunities being proposed.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
I can understand what's being said about the fact there would be no allocated site for development. I know that this wasn't the only site that came through. Unfortunately, just other sites that were identified in the process leading up to this coming to full council, that those particular sites were deemed not viable for various reasons. And I myself do see, looking at the map of Lochmaben there are some potential sites that could come out in future years. I really don't think that the Laverick Hall site will come to fruition. Access has been an issue for a number of years. There has been no resolution to it. It's been removed from the ship in the last couple of months, and that actually the best way forward is to remove it from LDP2. But of course, hopefully another site would come forward at some point, maybe not for this local development plan, but for future ones, because there is possible sites, but this one I just don't believe is viable.
Councillor Crothers, were you an amendment?
I mean, I'm always keen to hear what the local councils are saying, and we're hearing it from, this is obviously non-political, but I would struggle to to support something when you're moving this as the only identity. If it's unachievable, that would come out through the next 5 years. I just, ultimately, I mean, I'd like to hear what other members are saying, but it's, I don't know what it is to get political or aggressive in any way. I'd just like to hear, that's my views.
Councillor James and Councillor
Thank you, Chair. Point of clarification, maybe we could ask one of our experts. Could this be deemed to be a situation where H4 could kick in and a development out with the settlement boundary could be proposed, perhaps successfully?
Well, the site potentially is within the settlement boundary. If members were minded to remove the site, then I would certainly strongly recommend that we leave the settlement boundary as is shown in the proposed local development plan, so that it becomes a white land site that could come forward at any point in the future.
So perhaps I could have phrased that better. And my question is more that if there are no allocated sites within Lochmaben, is it then de facto at capacity, and therefore could then someone come with a site adjacent to the settlement boundary and use H4?
Okay, so that's a slightly different angle. The issue about whether there is sufficient supply would be looked at in the context of the wider housing market area. So there would have to be a lack of opportunities across the housing market area before land outside of a settlement would be released.
Councillor McClellan and Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. Could I make an amendment on a proposal that this site remains within the LDP, but as white land, that then allows opportunities to be put forward and explored in full? I think it would be wrong to leave Lochmaben without any development opportunities.
Councillor Marshall.
Mine was a similar question in regards to Councillor Wilson identified that there was some other, under the call for sites, there was some other sites that were identified. As we're going through the process now, there is another round of public consultation, and what is the likelihood that there could be an appeal, and particularly would the case be strengthened if there was no sites identified in Lochmaben if this one was removed? Would that actually maybe enhance the chances in an appeal on one of the other sites which seem to be more preferred?
Well, Chair, again, it's difficult to kind of prejudge what may or may not happen with an examination, but certainly the fact that there would be no remaining sites would be a factor that the reporter would take into account if he was assessing alternative sites. I think we had, Wendy, did we have others? How many other sites were submitted through the call for sites?
Only one.
There was only one other site that came forward for consideration in Lochmaben, so it's a fairly limited risk.
I ask the proposer and seconder of the motion whether you would be satisfied with Councillor McClellan's suggestion that if it is removed from the site, from LDP2, that it remains within the settlement and remains as white land. Would that be satisfactory to you?
With that further, what would be the possibilities after that? You know, because essentially it is my firm belief that there's never going to be a solution to finding access to these points. You know, and what would be the possibilities to come out from leaving it in? I'm quite happy for it to remain in the settlement boundary, but what would be the possibilities that could come out of it by leaving it as white land?
No,
I think
I'm not sure I can.
Councillor Wilson wants what the sort of status of the land would then be in terms of people wishing to submit a planning application.
Well, it would then be considered on its own merits, and there are clearly technical challenges associated with bringing this site forward, but technical challenges are capable of being resolved. The purpose in allocating a site is to give that degree of certainty to the site owner and developer that the principle of housing is already established, and therefore, under those circumstances, they might be more willing to invest in exploring technical solutions than if the site was deallocated and it was just as white land.
However, somebody could still bring a planning application forward, but they wouldn't have the reinforcement, if you like, of it being mentioned in the local development plan. I think Councillor Ferguson was first, and then Councillor Fagan.
Thanks, Leader. I think in simple terms, Steve, what you're saying is white land would actually make them be a bit more innovative and a bit more proactive in finding solutions rather than just coming forward. I think that's kind of just what you said there. Because I was going to ask the question, white land, the use could be for anything, pretty much, which would be worse for the residents round about the area rather than better if it was to be, for example, something forward with an industrial proposal. So I think I've got the clarity in my mind. You kindly answered it before I asked the question, so thank you.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, where I agree with Steve. Yeah, how can you explain overcoming technical difficulties? I've got Moss Vale in my head here, and I can't see how you'd overcome any technical difficulties. I appreciate there's a need for housing in Lochmaben and surrounding areas, but I don't see how you're going to overcome any technical difficulties in relation to access for that area.
I think a solution must be capable of being found, and certainly, as I say, we have consulted fairly extensively with our colleagues in roads on this site, so they clearly believe that a solution could be found. Otherwise, they would have objected to it being included as a development site. That's not to say there's a simple solution. And as I say, one of the benefits of having an allocated site is that it gives the site owner and developer that degree of comfort in exploring solutions.
Councillor Crothers?
I think probably in the interest of making safe decisions, I would support Councillor McClelland in the motion that he put forward, or the amendment, whatever it may be. I think to completely take it out, taking into consideration I think the needs there, the demands there, that's already been outlined by Steve. But I understand from a local perspective how contentious the site can be. And if there is technical difficulties, they won't be overcome, and it won't be built up anyways, it won't be constructed. So I would support, and just to fair enough, we remove it as an allocated housing site, but we leave the current settlement boundary as it is. I would support, if it needs a second, so we can go to the vote, then I would do that.
We have a motion from Councillor Wilson and Councillor Fairbairn that it is removed altogether. And we have an amendment from Councillor McClelland and Councillor Carruthers saying it's removed, but it remains within the settlement boundary and therefore it's white land. Are there any further amendments? No? Okay. Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell, Dougie Campbell?
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell?
Amendment.
Councillor Ian Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Amendment.
Councillor Giusti?
Amendment.
Councillor Howie? Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnson?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Amendment.
Councillor Little?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall?
Motion.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McClelland?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Amendment.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson?
Motion.
Councillor Tate? Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Councillor Wood.
Amendment.
Councillor Young.
Amendment.
The amendment is carried 20 votes to 6.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to Newton Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. The representations that we received concerning various housing sites in Newton Stewart, NST H4 Corsby Road and NST H7 Old Hall, 63 units and 50 units. The representation seeking that they should be removed from LDP2 due to a number of issues and constraints, principally those relating to access, flooding, landscape, and impact on water and drainage systems. And furthermore, that these sites should be replaced with alternative sites that were submitted earlier on in response to the main issues report for different opportunity sites which are closer to the A75. So the sites themselves are, and the accompanying text, we're talking about page 196 and 197 of the proposed plan. And on the document that was handed out at the start on page 8, you'll see the fairly detailed response that we've provided there, which is to suggest that, well, first of all, the sites were included because they're certainly considered to be effective in terms of having an active landowner and developer who's indicated their intention to bring the sites forward for development during the current plan period. We carried out a number of consultations, as we do on all sites, both internally and externally. And whilst there are a number of constraints relating to the site, they are all capable of being addressed through site guidance. However, reflecting some of the issues and concerns that have been raised in the submission, what we've recommended is that the wording for both sites, NST H4 and H7, should be beefed up to reflect, first of all, a requirement for a transport assessment, in particular to determine the impact that the development would have on the capacity of the surrounding road network, and that would also identify any associated mitigation works that would be required, and also a drainage impact assessment would be required, together with appropriate surface water management measures. And in relation to site NSTH7, we've suggested beefing up the requirement for a comprehensive landscaping scheme, including the protection of the avenue of beech trees leading to Dunkery Wood, together with a drainage impact assessment that will be required, together with appropriate surface water management measures. And those requirements are all to ensure that those sites are capable of being developed in an acceptable fashion. Happy to take further questions.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, Cray Valley Community Council were against both of these sites. They felt that development further up the sides of the valley should be frowned upon. However, we realise there are limited sites available. My main concern with this one is both these sites, 113 units in total, will discharge traffic down into the town centre via Dashwood Square, and it would impact on school buses and school vehicles travelling into Douglas Ure. It's already very congested. So I'd like to know how that would be addressed, if that can be done today. And also the transport assessment for NSTH4 I would ask that that be done for NSDH7 also, because both these sites discharge into the same area.
Thank you. Any further comment? Sorry, Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know whether Steve wants to answer before I put my points, but I'll put them anyway. I fully back what Councillor Ingalls has said. A transport assessment needs done now. Never speak of when we build other houses or contemplate building other houses, because the traffic congestion up by the Douglas Yurt is horrendous, especially at school entry and exit times. And there's something needs to be done. The roads are totally inadequate at this point in time, and I think a transport assessment needs to be done right now, not wait till a potential development takes place. But I'll be interested to hear what Steve has to say.
Okay, Chair. Yeah. Well, certainly the requirement to carry out a transport assessment means that any developer would have to carry that out first and submit it to us along with the planning application. So that that would be done in advance of development and would also identify any mitigation measures that were required, and would also address things like peak traffic flows and junction pinch points and so on. So all of that detail would be covered by a transport assessment, and we can certainly add that requirement into the H7 site. Also, as you say, that they need really to be looked at comprehensively in terms of their impact on the local road network.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. Dashwood Square is a choke point as far as, say, traffic movement is concerned. It doubles up as a bus terminal, and that also adds to the congestion. So it is essential that a traffic management study be carried out.
Sorry, Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Leader. Just to come back in, there is another site actually, H207, the former community centre site. Again, that site discharges onto exactly the same roads as the other two sites. And we've already had a 30-odd unit site built in Woodlands that discharges onto Corsby Grove also. So there would be major issues with traffic coming from both these sites to come down into the town centre.
Are you wishing to propose? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I hear what the local members are saying, but we've just had similar issues that I raised in respect to Lochmaben and our site. I'm sure that would be the same here. I think we're possibly going to, I think we've set a little bit of a precedence earlier on, and we should maybe follow that.
I think individual sites have to be considered on their own merit. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I quite agree with Adam there. If officers think that these difficulties can become overcome by technical solutions, which I don't see any reason why it can't be.
We did agree to remove the other site.
Yeah.
We did really agree to remove
it's
the
a
other
right
site.
site, but it was voted against technical solutions.
Okay. Jim, you want him back in, Jim?
Yes, Leader. It was in relation to the site at Creebridge Caravan Park.
I don't think we're on to that one yet.
Right. Yeah, that's the next one.
Thanks, Chair. Let me back in. I would like to say that the script in the red answers a lot of the problems which wasn't in the original documentation we had. So that answers a lot of the local problems. But I would also, in response to Councillor Wilson, there are other methods of access to these sites apart from coming down into town, and maybe that should be looked at when an application actually comes in.
So do we actually have a proposal on the table in terms of these sites then? Or are we content with the officer's recommendations? Okay, Councillor Inglis.
Sorry, Chair, as long as the transport assessment's included in the NSTH7 site as well.
We would be content to go with the officer recommendations as long as the transport issue is addressed. Okay, grand. And now we can go on to the Creebridge Caravan Park.
Thanks, Leader.
Steve will present this first and then...
Right, thank you.
This submission was raising the issue in connection with the proposed allocated housing site NST H202, Creebridge Caravan Park, not Caravan Park as it says there, in Newton Stewart. There's been some concern expressed locally by residents on the site about their future continuity of occupation being compromised if the whole site is designated for housing development. This is on page 197 within your documents. And our response to that is that we consider this to be an effective site and that any issues between existing occupiers are really a private legal matter that would need to be resolved between them. But there's no reason for us not to allocate the site, and we've had correspondence from the owner clarifying the position as far as they're concerned, and that gives us the certainty to have proceeded with recommending that this was allocated. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. I don't think there is any dispute over the ownership of the site. The problem is that the residents are paying a monthly ground rent, and I would be very surprised if they do not have an agreement about that rent. It does state that there are no leases or licenses or any contractual agreements. That surprises me. I would fully anticipate that you will be hearing from their legal representatives in relation to this matter.
Well, certainly they would have the ability to submit representations to us when this is published for public consultation at the end of the month.
Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, I hear what Jim's saying, and I got the same correspondence that Councillor McComb got. But to my mind, this is a private matter between the residents and the caravan site owner, and it's up to them to sort it out. It's not a planning matter at this point, is my understanding of the situation. I may be wrong, but...
Take your advice, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, that was our view as well, that this is a private legal matter between the parties.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. That was exactly the point I was trying to make, that the legal representative will be in touch. That is my understanding.
But it isn't really the advice we're getting is not really a planning matter. It's a matter of dispute. So can I ask, are we content to go along with the officer's recommendations in this? Yes. And finally, does anybody, Councillor Marshall?
Sorry, Chair, were you going to just ask if there's any other points?
I was going to ask if there was any other sites which hadn't already been submitted that we want to put in or discuss. Okay, Councillor Marshall.
No, there's one really that I just really wanted a little bit more explanation or clarification from officers, please. It's in relation to page 104, and it's page 112 of 368. It's the Annan map, and at the top northeast there is Annan.B&I1, which is the business and industrial area. And I'm just really wondering, because when you look now, when I see the overall map, there's a natural boundary there, the settlement boundary. It runs all the way, joining the A75. And I just wanted some information on, there's a rectangular site to the northeast of B&I1 and a triangular site towards, to the northeast, and a rectangular site towards the northwest. I'm just wondering, was there any call for sites in those? And if there was, what were the reasons? Because it would look logical to actually have considered them under the settlement boundary.
Certainly, there was a call for site submitted in relation to the smaller, the kind of rectangular area that's right up next to the railway. Sorry, the A75. There are clearly constraints that apply on that site, and it wasn't included. I'm just reading for you from our assessment of that site at the main issues stage, which is that site was not included for development due to the high voltage electricity route and pylons crossing the site, resulting in significant issues of development viability and adverse planning issues. Would also involve the loss of prime agricultural land and greenfield site. The other thing to add, really in the context of the proposed new allocation, is about providing something of sufficient scale to ensure that development would be viable, which is why the larger site on the other side of the road was identified, and in particular, because of its relationship to the 75 and the junction with the 75, which would make it a good proposition for either new businesses or inward investment businesses.
Councillor Crothers?
Actually, I mean, I did see that one myself when Councillor Marshall's referred to it. It's the whole, I mean, it looks a bit obtuse almost, but I mean, I wouldn't have anything against just rounding them off. Mostly if it's been through the process. I think we understand is we got clarification in regards to we can't allocate sites that haven't been through the call for sites and been through that due screening process. But if one of them sites in there have been actually through the process, I would imagine it's just a natural rounding off, and we should probably just allocate it.
Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, I would probably ask for maybe just to look at that again, because I hear the main argument being about the pylons, etc., but that's an issue that has been up there and part, on one of the other sites which was overcome. So it just looks like it would be a natural, the boundary would be extended, and then the boundary would be certainly the A75 would be right along to the A75 to 5 road ends and down the B6357. So there's potential, there's development there anyways, and there is a lack of space there. There's businesses that are trying to vie for the business park there. So I think there's opportunities there, even though I hear the constraints. So I would ask if maybe delegate officers to have a look at that again.
Well, Chair, I mean, certainly the point's well made about the boundary, the settlement boundary at that point, and I don't see any difficulty with just carrying that straight across and including that triangular piece of land within the settlement boundary as white land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Content with that. Mm-hmm. There's two bits. There's actually two bits of land. There's actually the other sort of trapezium, wonky trapezium sized one as well. Yes, I don't. Yeah, we just finished the site. I presume it's a different site that you. No, I was wondering whether yourself and Councillor Nicholson want to talk about a different site, or is it the same site? It is the same site. It is the same site. Oh, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Ferguson. It's not. That's what I was wondering. I was going to conclude discussion on this site first before we moved on to any other site. Okay.
Can I just clarify that we're talking about the sites at either side of B&I1? So that the straight line that comes right beside the A75 would then go straight the way along to meet with the B6357. So it takes in both sites either side of B&I1.
So these
there certainly seem to be natural settlement boundaries, so we'll look at realigning the boundary up in that corner.
I would agree with that. I would imagine the allocation would be white land, naturally sit within the settlement boundary in each case on its own merits if any potential applications come forward. I would agree with Councillor Marshall in that regard.
So, people content with that suggestion from two local members? Okay. Okay, Councillor Nicholson and then Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that Andy will be talking about the same one as I'm going to talk about now, if that's any help.
Yeah, I was sort of assuming that.
It's about DFS H1 and it's a Burn Hill. And I agree, whilst I agree with, everything that's...
Yeah, could you give us a page?
Page 101, sorry.
101. Thanks.
Okay. It's when I talk about DFS H1 Burn Hill, 259 units allocated beyond 2029. I agree with all the wording in this, but apart from, I don't understand why it's allocated beyond 2029.
Steve?
Essentially, it's because there are a number of unresolved issues to do with ownership. The site is split currently into a number of ownerships, and it's unlikely that that would be resolved in the short term. However, by providing the long-term certainty of saying the principal housing development on this wider site is acceptable, it's hoped that that will stimulate some form of agreement being reached between the various parties. However, we're not at all confident that that would happen in the short term, so we don't regard it as being a short-term deliverable site.
I understand what you're saying there, about that, but surely that's not up to us, is it, to do that? It'll be, up to the owners of the land to agree themselves. And whilst I understand completely, and I would hope it would be developed as a whole site, I mean, that surely should, maybe spur them into coming to some kind of agreement sooner or not. But if it's there, and they do come to an agreement, well, they could probably go on with it.
Councillor Ferguson?
Ronnie's actually said it all. Thanks.
Would there be any particular problem in bringing that forward? Or indicating that it could be a site prior to 2029?
The issue for us is that as things stand, it's not considered to be effective. So in the short term, we have to maintain a 5-year supply of effective housing land. This site, because of those ownership constraints, is currently not considered to be effective, and we certainly wouldn't want to give the wrong message about people coming forward with individual proposals, and we're trying to make it clear that piecemeal development wouldn't be accepted.
Okay, yeah, for Councillor McKee.
I understand what you're saying there. I was just trying to make up the numbers of the houses we lost at Noah Hill.
Councillor McKee.
As they share it with the Lochmaben who lost the houses. It's regarding Marksall High School. Could he identify the boundary, please? Are he using the existing school boundary, or are he moving in using the field that goes across to a row of trees that goes up the hill towards the industrial estate?
So, is this a different site, Councillor McKee? Is it a different site?
Sorry, it's Marksall High School, DFS.
Right. We're still on Barn Hill. Something further to say about Barn Hill, Councillor Ferguson? What's your proposal? Roger says here, being allocated up to 2029, right? Okay. Councillor Nicholson, do you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Andy, but listening to the officers, I can understand it might set precedents in other areas now, and it might, because they're trying to get things in within the 5 years and push things on that way. I don't know. Whilst I completely sympathise with what you're saying as well, because I couldn't get my head around it.
So are you wanting to make a proposal, Councillor Ferguson? Yeah, is there a second? Would there be a second for a motion to change the wording to up to 2029? Malcolm Johnson seconded that. Okay. So is there? Right. So we've got a motion to change the wording. Have a motion to keep the wording the same?
I'll second if Councillor Nicholson's putting in an amendment.
No, he's not. He's not now. He's not now putting in an amendment. So how do we put an amendment now? So there's a motion to change the wording. Is there any amendment to that motion? Is there an amendment to go with the officer's recommendation? No.
Is it just to change to 2029?
Yeah, the motion is to change it from 259 units allocated beyond 2029 to 259 units allocated up to 2029. So we have a mover in Andy Ferguson and a seconder in Malcolm Johnson. What I'm asking is there any alternative? Well, it's not really an amendment, is it? But is there an amendment to go with the officer's recommendations?
What due respect, we can say what we like, if that person doesn't want to sell the land, you'll look at it even.
No, I'm actually asking at the moment, do we, there's a motion to change the wording. Is there an amendment to go with the officer's recommendation?
Go with the officer's recommendation, Chair, I'll move.
Okay, right, I do have a seconder to go with it.
I'll second
Councillor
that.
Davison seconds that. Okay, right, we can proceed.
The next challenge is to try and remember who's still in the room. Right, so motion by Councillor Ferguson and the amendment by Councillor McKee. Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader.
Amendment.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Giusti.
Motion.
Councillor Howie. No. Councillor Ingalls.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Johnson.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor Little.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin. Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Nichol.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor, I'm struggling here. Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
Okay. Has everybody voted that's in the room? Yeah. The motion is carried by 12 votes to 9.
You weren't on your own at all, Councillor Ferguson. Okay, Councillor McKee, you've got another site.
Yes, it's just to want to ensure where the boundary is for the Marks Hyde site. Is it the existing school boundary, or have you extended it over the next field to a wooded section?
Could you indicate which site
H262.
262, okay. Sorry. I can't find it. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, I think David's maybe talking about when it's not in here. It's potential, is it?
Was it right potential site?
It's just the size of the map. It's not easy to identify where the where the boundary is.
Yeah.
I can't see it. I don't see it on T262, I'm afraid. Right, this is, oh, right, it's not page 262, it's H262 on page 105. Okay. Right, and, yeah, so you're just requiring clarification on that,
It's just clarification on whether it's the existing school boundary. It's only a wire fence, but the other side of the field from the school is a tree line boundary. Just to make sure that it's the existing school boundary that they're using.
Okay.
Yeah, we think it is the existing school boundary. We're just double checking on a more detailed map that we're pulling up here, but it is the existing school boundary. It doesn't extend into the next field, which adjoins the industrial estate.
So are you content with that? Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
So anything, if there was another potential site, you can tell people to just put in their submission later. Yeah, okay.
Yes, there's still the opportunity for members of the public and developers to put in submissions for inclusion. Have any further sites, Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Campbell?
It's not a site, so I can move it. I mean, it's actually a quick discussion, if you don't mind, on policy H4, but if there's any more sites, happy to take the policy thing last. Just it's a very small piece that we picked up as we went through the meeting, or we would have obviously said it before.
Councillor Campbell, do you have another site? Okay. Okay. Can you give us the reference to the site?
My reference to the site is Dumfries H8.
H8, and the page is?
And it's on page 103.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to? Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I was just looking back at the previous LDP plan and the proposed one, which is what we're potentially going to be agreeing today. Looking at the site, without sounding like a broken record over green spaces, there's a large green space in the original LDP round about Catherinefield Farm, and looking at the map on the proposed one is sort of like cut in half. It's like as if we've lost a little bit of green space there. I just want some clarification around that. Thank you.
Okay.
There is still area of protective open space identified in LDP2. The site boundaries for the Catherinefield site in particular have been amended to reflect what was submitted by the landowner stroke developer who's proposing to bring the development forward. So that reflects the boundary of what we consider now to be the actual developable site.
Yeah, thank you. I can clearly see that it's actually increased in size, which is a good thing for housing, but it reduces the size of green space. That's the point I was trying to make.
There doesn't seem to be any mention of green space in the master planning requirements.
Well, there are I think in terms of the designation as protected open space, that's not the only open space that would be provided, and it would certainly be a requirement that open space is provided within the development. That open space is required to be provided within all developments, and there are policies that set out, and also supplementary guidance that set out clearly those requirements. So just because a site is allocated for development doesn't mean that it's not going to contain any areas of green space and open space.
Okay. Are you content with the explanation?
Yeah, content with that.
Okay. Anything further? I think we'll soon have no councillors left, actually. But Councillor Ferguson. Yes, I don't know. Just check. We're still okay. Okay, right. Okay. Okay, Councillor Carruthers?
Thanks, Leader. I'll just briefly outline what I'm thinking, and I think David wants to kind of add to it. Policy H4, which is on page 46 for what I can see in our papers. And what it says, settlement boundaries defined on the inset map indicate the extent to which the regional capital, district and local centres should be allowed to develop during the course of the local development plan. Housing development should be contained within the settlement boundary, and proposals for housing development immediately outside and defined settlement boundaries will only be considered where a shortfall has been identified by the council through the housing land audit with regard to the provision of an effective 5-year housing land supply within the housing market area. Now, something that's come up again is where the most recent one I can remember was one, I think it was in the Algoth area, and they said, listen, they'd applied for, I think it's maybe 4 or 5 houses adjacent to the settlement boundary in Algoth, a small place, obviously. It was Algoth or Closeburn, I forget exactly which one it was. And they were refused because within that housing market area, which is Dumfries, there was enough land in Dumfries and Moffat and Lochmaber and everywhere else at the time. Actually says, no, we've got any God's amount of housing land area that we can, housing land supply, that we can actually build on. Therefore, it constrained them. And I just wonder, I mean, that certainly, from our perspective, is potential issue. But I know David wants to say some words in regards to that as well. But it's been an issue in the past in regards to small settlements expanding and growing.
David?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I don't think H4 as it stands is fit for purpose, and I'd be interested in the views of the other fellow councillors here. But we've seen the Lochmaben case here where I think some of us probably thought it's maybe not a suitable site, but there's no other site. This town's going to be blocked from expansion, and I was surprised, but it does actually say the housing market is the definitive boundary rather than the regional capital district centre or local centre. So if you had a situation where there was a great boom in Sankar and it ran out of housing, there wouldn't be an expansion possible in Sankar, and people would be told, well, there's space in Dumfries. So I'm not sure that the housing market area approach is a good one anyway, but I think in this case it's far too restrictive, and I suppose everybody knows the examples of where it could kick in, and we need to allow some flexibility for a whole set of circumstances which could occur. And I mean, we could think of different ways to word this policy, but if the housing land audit currently has figures down to capital district centre and local centre size, then we could just supplant those 3 terms in there instead of the housing market area. If it doesn't, then there are people better qualified than me to find a solution, but one would be to stop after identified by the council, full stop, and strike the next part of that sentence. But I'd be interested in other views around the tables.
Okay, Steve, could you give some guidance on that?
The basic building block in terms of planning for meeting future housing need is the housing market area, and the information that is provided by the housing needs and demands assessment, which forms the basis of all the figures in the LDP, is based on housing market areas, and that's why housing market areas are used for planning purposes both in here and in the local housing strategy. I have to say that the policy, as it currently stands, I mean, this is a policy that's infrequently used, simply because the situation hasn't arisen. We don't get the level of take-up of allocated sites that leaves us in a situation where we actually have a shortfall in any of our housing market areas, and until such time as there's a complete change in the fortunes in the region and we become the subject of extreme development pressure, it's unlikely that policy is going to be very, very much used. If we also find ourselves in that position at some point in the future, then that would actually be a trigger for a complete review of the LDP, rather than trying to agree and adjust new development adjacent to settlement boundaries. So if we were faced with development pressures of that magnitude, it would trigger a review of LDP.
Councillor Crothers.
Thanks. I mean, it begs the question, and going back to the decision that we've made, go forward as a proposed plan, that within Lochmaben area, as an identified settlement, there's no allocation for housing in there. Now, other might be opportunistic, brownfield, so on and so forth. But Steve outlined there is, because of the scale of development and the take-up, there is a real need at that local centre, that district centre. And that's, I think, the point we're trying to draw out. So how do we now accommodate someone like Lochmaben other than waiting another 5 years, another call for sites, all the rest of it? How do we actually address that potential problem? There is a need and a demand within that area. And any other settlement, it could be, you could point to across Dumfries and Galloway potentially. But there's one we've actually looked at today where there's no allocated sites. There might be a wee bit of opportunity potential, need and demands going by previous build-outs and take up for the housing allocation in that area. How do our policies address that particular problem?
Councillor James?
Yes, I agree. It probably is infrequently used because it's just about impossible to imagine a set of circumstances where this would kick in, because that would mean that all sites had been used within the whole of any one housing market area before a settlement could, or a part of that housing market area could take advantage of H4. So it's not fit to do what it was. As Councillor Crothers pointed out, I mean, you can imagine a circumstance like in Lochmaben, or let's say a town, let's take Sankers, they run it as one again, it gets a factory, people want to live there, and it doesn't have anything like the capacity there, and then people are told, well, there's space in Dumfries. Our housing market areas are so widely spread geographically, I don't think that's the unit size we should be looking at for this policy. And if this policy can't cover it, we need a policy which covers the circumstances where a town, a settlement needs to grow.
Chair, all I can do is reiterate what I said before, which is the housing market areas are the basic building blocks, and it's a requirement of Scottish Government planning policy for us to address the need for a generous supply of land for each housing market area within the plan area. So it's actually, that is dictated to us by Scottish Government, that we use housing market areas as the building block, not individual settlements.
And that is defined by statute?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Wilson.
Leader, in the absence of any proposals to actually change this, it is my understanding, I'm not going to pretend that I know very little about planning, I know very little about this development plan, but the whole housing market areas were based on sort of travel between work and home, and a whole number of factors like that. And we've seen in this plan that there is reference to things like the Borderlands Initiative, like the South Scotland Enterprise Agency. And so really, if there is any sort of economic development, a new factory opening up in Sanker, really this local development plan has taken that into consideration. And so in the absence of any proposals, I think that, and if the officers could add anything to this, it would be helpful. Really, anything like that, any potential expansion that this region may face has been addressed in this plan. We don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, but essentially we've tried to plan for whatever could happen to ensure that everyone who needs a house in this region can get one.
Chair, and just to reiterate the purpose behind having policy H4 in the first place was to provide additional flexibility should it be required at any point during the plan period. If members don't feel that it's necessary or doesn't achieve that, then it could simply be deleted.
Yeah. But I think the issue is that it's not so much that when people are asking for it to be deleted, but it's not addressing it. It's only when there's a shortfall within the housing market area that this kicks in. And I think what the argument members are making is that in some parts of the region, there could be a shortage of housing, and yet there's not a shortage of housing in for example, the Dumfries market area could still have quite a lot of housing allocated, but quite far away from where it was needed. And I think that's actually the issue.
I understand the point. The housing market areas, we're required to use those as the planning unit for matching housing need, demand and supply. And these things are identified at the level of the housing market area. They're not identified at an individual settlement basis, and that's the whole basis of the HNDA process that we go through with our colleagues in housing, and that the council uses as its basic planning building block for meeting future housing need.
Councillor McClellan?
Thank you, Leader. Steve, just in relation to H4 then, how would you explain maybe the situation that's arisen in Lochmaben? So how would H4 be applied to Lochmaben, for instance, where there's currently no sites available for development?
Well, the requirement would be on the developer to demonstrate that there are no sites within the housing market area. So they would have to look at the housing market area, because that is the basic building block, the planning block that we work to. And that's also the only level at which evidence is available to support. That's the only level at which housing need is calculated.
But
can I come back? Yeah, just then to seek clarity for everyone else then, Steve. So that housing market area, what is that defined as for Lochmaben? What is the housing market area? Because I'm trying to get some definition on the shortfalls of policy H4. So what is the housing market area for Lochmaben?
Well, the housing market areas are defined in the HNDA, which is the Housing Need and Demand Assessment, which is this exercise, as I say, that's carried out with our colleagues in strategic housing, that forms the basic building blocks for both LDP and the local housing strategy. David will pull the housing market areas up on the screen so you can see all 6 of them. And these were identified by the consultants that first set up the HNDA model based on their analysis of, in particular, things like travel to work patterns, but also they looked at house moves. So what they were looking to do was to identify self-contained housing market areas. In other words, the vast majority of house moves within those boundaries happen within the boundary rather than out to other parts of the region. So they actually analysed all of the records of house moves and used that as one of the basic starting points for identifying the housing market areas. So this has been in place for 10 years or so, and formed the basis for the previous local development plan and forms the basis for our local housing strategies.
How would that be amended? Because these areas are huge. You know, how would that, these housing market areas be amended to be more reflective of what's, I mean, if you're talking about some areas where public transport is poor, there's not much, there's no way that people are going to be able to get from one part of the street to another if that's where the area that you can build a house. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the way I'm looking at this, if somebody's working in Lochmaben but lives in Sederunt, because that's the only place they could get a house.
Yes. Councillor Crothers.
Thanks. I mean, the point's been trying to get across. I think if Steve's said that, listen, we only have the information that drills down as far as the local housing market area, I thought we actually had it below that as well. And that's where I think David mentioned district and local centres. And because he did refer to actually there being a clear need and demand in Lochmaben, just using it as an example. So, I mean, our Chief Social Work Officer and our Deputy Chief Executive, I forget what her title is now, but you've got Lillian, they travel for the central belt here on a daily basis. So what John G said is absolutely credible. You can Southern Est to Lochmaben or whatever it may be. It happens all the time. But you've actually got, the point is, I think it's trying to be stressed, and I think you're getting a grasp of it, Leader. These areas are so large that if we get the information down to a wee bit of a lower level, understand where that lower level need is, it will certainly help develop and create a better H4 policy, I think, or address that particular problem. We have had it. People in Moffat complaining because there's still an allocation in Dumfries. They're part of the Dumfries housing market area. I'm sorry, there's any God's amount of housing allocated in your housing market area, but there's no correlation between Moffat and Dumfries in any great terms, other than that we've identified it as being a housing market area. And same it goes right up to Sanker and Kirkconnell. I would argue that anyway, certainly.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Wilson was first.
It would appear.
Councillor Wilson was first, please, and then Councillor McGee.
I just wondered if the officers have the maps. I understand what's being said, but I wonder if the officers have the maps that they were able to show to, particularly those of us who have wards in the housing market area, which, you know, in Dumfries housing market area. You know, like, so particularly for my ward, Dumfries is, because of its closeness, so important for employment and for leisure. But at the same time, I can see how it's important to those in Thornhill as well, and I can understand why that leads to such a big housing market area. So I just wonder if the officers had those sort of graphs that might be able to give a bit more detail in this area.
Councillor McKee and then Councillor Davidson.
People are entitled to live where they like. There's 3 or 4 people in this building travel for Hamilton, Glasgow area every day. And there's staff sitting along here, God knows where they stay, but I'll bet they're saying to themselves, thank God I never come to planning committee meetings. Absolute nightmare. But people, I'm sure if people want a house in a specific area, if you're only talking about one house, if you're talking about building 100 houses, this is what this local development plan's about. These guys here are trying to stir it up, and they're talking about one house in an area, which is an absolute nonsense. Well, with all due respect, if you're coming up with 100 houses or more for a specific area, I'm sure these guys here will go out and help to identify it.
Can't. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. I think we're at severe risk of unpicking the plan by accident at the end of quite a lengthy afternoon, and possibly the strategic housing investment plan into the bargain. I think we just need to be slightly cautious about wherever we are going with this, and I'm not sure anyone is actually clear at this point where we are going with this particular question. I understand the question. I'm not clear that there is an immediately available answer. Certainly not an easy one. I do wonder, however, looking at 330 at page 27, given that we at least allocate housing land requirement down as far as district and local centres, whether that might offer some sensible amendment for H4, at least so far as district and local centres are concerned. It won't deal with every settlement boundary, but it might offer something that allowed a degree of flexibility which would maybe overcome the slightly blunt instrument, which I think members are right to refer to. But I would strongly suggest that if that wasn't feasible, we should leave well alone, because otherwise what we will have to do is go right back to square one. Not back to square one of the plan, but back to square one of the housing needs and demand assessment. And I think the progress of that through the various committees and subcommittees back in the day took months, if not years.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, I'm agreeing with Rob to a certain extent, but the question was asked, and I think it's quite a reasonable question, how old is this data? And how has the region changed in that time? And I was just obliged me, you know, I won Euromillions on Friday night, and I'm going to put an aqua park up in Loch Ken, and I'm going to have 250 employees. Where are we going to put them? Kikupi? You know, and it might seem silly, But I think it's the essence of what they're saying here, is we don't know who's going to come into the region. What happens in Stranraer if we get a significant investment in the waterfront and significant jobs, and they're earning enough houses in Stranraer? Are we really going to put people in Newton Stewart?
Okay. I think there is a problem. There is a problem which people are identifying. I don't think we can change these just now. We cannot change these at the moment. It's something we might want to look at, but we can't actually change it just now. Rob, did you have a suggestion in terms of?
Well, I was specifically looking for advice on the I think it's a housing land requirement, which is allocated down as far as district and local centres. Obviously, that won't help with every other settlement, but it would at least give an allocation effectively to district and local centres, which clearly, if that had been exhausted, could pose a reasonable trigger for H4, at least so far as district and local centres are concerned. What it wouldn't do, of course, is cover all the other settlements where the housing land requirement wasn't further allocated, if you follow me. It might be a stopgap, given what's been identified, but I think if that's not feasible, we need to leave it well alone and not unpick any further. But I would defer to Steve on this one.
Yeah, well, could I suggest, Chair, with your approval or agreement, that we take that away and look at it, because I would not like to strongly advise that we change to include that unless I've had the opportunity to check out whether it is kind of technically and legally watertight. Because this has just been raised with us this afternoon, we haven't had that opportunity to confirm that.
That's probably why.
So I'll take that away. And if it is possible to change it to reflect those concerns and to insert the word and to insert the district and local centres instead of housing market areas, then we will do that.
So Councillor Wilson and Councillor James had indicated that they wanted to say.
Thank you, Leader. I think, obviously the point's now starting to be made about the fact that there seems to be sort of a disagreement with what's happened so far in this process. I was just wondering if the officers could sort of say, for the process up until now, sort of what's that time frame been? And also as well, what is the legal requirement that this council has to meet to actually submit the final plan to the government or whoever else needs to be done? I want to come back to an earlier point. An earlier point I made was that, we could have a new factory built in Sanka, we could have a new employment opportunity at Loch Ken. The thing is, though, that this plan has looked to see and identify opportunities that might come within the next 10 years, and the South Scotland Enterprise Agency and the Borderlands Initiative have been identified. I mean, if members know something that all of us don't and the officers don't, well, maybe they want to share that now. But essentially, we hear a lot about what businesses do from certain members of this chamber. Well, I know that businesses plan about 10 years in advance. Businesses plan 10 years in advance to get the resources in the right place, to get the capital required. So generally, if something's going to happen next 10 years, a factory open or something, we're going to know about it, and that means that we can put it into this local development plan, like what's been done, and actually make sure there is the housing supply to meet the demand. I won't come on to my third question because I can tell we're going to be here for another couple of times, but I think those points need to be reinforced.
Well, in terms of the time scale, that was all laid out by Steve at the beginning of the meeting, because and unfortunately you were not present, but we do have to agree the plan today.
I completely agree with that. I appreciate the time frame. I think there's some members seem to be, saying that they don't agree with what's been done so far and coming with suggestions on how it could be changed.
No, I don't think they're saying. I think they're identifying. I think members have been identifying a problem which can't necessarily be resolved easily, but there is a problem there, and Steve has said that he's prepared to take that away and consider whether there is a way of amending that to make it a bit more relevant, I think, to the different communities in the region. Councillor James, you wanted to say something else?
Yes, I'm happy that Councillor Davison identified that we do actually have stats and figures down to district and local centre size. That would be very useful in this context. Councillor Wilson's comments that the companies plan always 10 years in advance, and we hear all about what's happening. I just think that's not true, and we have to be flexible to be able to respond should an opportunity occur or just unforeseen circumstances. I believe there's a consensus here that there is a problem, a danger that we might not foresee a circumstance and then be blocked by our own policy. And one element wasn't quite mentioned, that although we all have we can live where we like. I mean, I think our local plan, one of its key aims is sustainability. So I think there should be an opportunity, should a factory open, that people could actually then live near that. And it's maybe not a factory, maybe other things can happen. We can't foresee all eventualities, but I would welcome a reflection by Steve and his team to come forward with a better form of wording. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers?
I'll just come back to what you said. I think Councillor Davison said, Councillor James and Steve Rogers, I think that it's right that it's probably, when it comes back to us after representations, probably look at this again. I think Steve's right.
I don't think we can look at it again after representations.
No, I think we possibly could. If the representation comes forward, we've picked up on it here. I mean, I don't think we've got time between now and the 29th, I think, which is an important date to go to consultation.
I'm just wondering in terms of the process, how much flexibility. We did talk about the statutory guidance, that there might be opportunities to look at that again, but I don't know how much further.
Are we still talking specifically about H4? Because what I intended was that we would make that change before the public consultation, would do it in the next week or so.
Okay, but as long as we have to call another full council, how do we get on about that? No,
we're not
that's the time getting to.
we're not calling another full council. Do we have a plan?
Yep. So as long as Mr. Rogers knows what his remit is, and we get some kind of feedback in regards to what he's putting out, we can at least reply to that. So I think we'd be content with that, Leader.
Yes, are we prepared? So we've considered it. We now have to approve the proposed plan with the agreed amendments. Are we prepared to do that? A few of us left. And agreed also to its publication on the 29th of January. Yeah, fine. And that consultation period will be for 8 weeks. Are we content to approve the pieces of draft supplementary guidance and the draft action plan? Okay. And to authorise the Head of Planning and Regulatory Services to make minor changes to the format, appearance and technical details, and indeed the item that we've just been discussing now. Okay. Oh, I thought we did this. Yeah. Oh, right. We also have to consider the updated Strategic Environment Assessment Environmental Report in Appendix 2, as well as Appendix 1. Okay.
I'm not wanting to prolong this, but that last discussion we had...
Sorry, we're in the middle of actually... Are you suggesting we don't approve this?
No, just a second, because I think we need to make it clear, the work we've asked Steve to do about the settlements and the housing market stuff is, doesn't it, when he sends out whatever the outcome of that is around the membership, it's not an invitation to start all over again.
Oh, no.
Absolutely. Well, we need to be clear on that. Yeah, that's the point I'm making, yeah.
No. Right. Okay. Councillor Marshall?
Chair, the only other thing to note on the recommendations is that it was probably in hindsight was right to actually not have this as an item on the council agenda in the future. Yes. It does merit actually having a detailed meeting on its own to discuss it.
Does it merits its own meeting? Yeah. Very much so.
Might be a good idea to have a 9:30 start date, Chair.
It wasn't possible because we had to reschedule it at that short notice, but in future, yes, it should be. And we have something we haven't done. We haven't considered the updated strategic environment. What's it? Appendix 2. We've considered it. Good. Okay.
Normally, in the last LDP, we actually thanked the staff for the hours and hours and hours of work that's gone into this. And
I think that's a very good point. That it has been a tremendous amount of work on behalf of all of the staff over a protracted period of time, and that's a point well made, Councillor Ferguson.
And the poor souls are getting punished by sitting out here hearing the call.
Thank you.
Right, well done, Leader. Well done. That was all after